Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. Thank you for joining me for this very special edition of Fearless. It's kind of our cookout, but it's also Roll Call 2.0. It's the kickoff of Roll Call 2.0. It's an all-day event, Men's Summit on Saturday. Today we have some of our VIPs and sponsors here, along with a collection of basketball coaches who we're going to get into some serious discussion about mentoring, discipling young men in the era of NIL, name, image, and likeness, transfer portal, and just all the money that has flooded into college sports. But before I do any of that, I'm probably going to spend 5-10 minutes giving these guys a very hard time. I know I can joke with these guys, particularly Tim Floyd. Tim Floyd, former Bulls coach, and you guys have seen Tim on the show before. I don't know if anybody has worked harder on roll call than Tim Floyd. So I want to start there with the positive. Tim Floyd has worked incredibly hard on roll call, and he was in position to be the MVP of roll call. I don't know if you guys know this, but he was the betting favorite in Las Vegas just 2 or 3 hours ago.
But I lost out.
Heavy favorite. But Tim and Greg Kampe, the head basketball coach at Oakland University, and Tim's buddies, his retired buddies, Kermit Davis and John Brady. Guess who showed up late to roll call? The VIP event. And everybody has blamed Tim Floyd for this. A group of coaches? I just can't believe it. Like, if you're 15 minutes ahead of time, you're still late, or I can't remember what Belichick or anybody, but Tim, do you have an explanation?
Well, I do. It was John Brady's fault, and we were waiting on him. He's gotten a little older. It took a little while to get his.
He looked better than you. If he's,
Well,
you know.
but the tennis balls had come off of his walker, getting out of the hotel. So it took us a little longer.
Well, thank you guys for real for being here. Later, Voddie Baucham will be here. We'll have a little transition, a more serious discussion with Voddie. You guys know Voddie, a great evangelist. He's written a book that we're going to have a conversation about. They're Not Like Us, how the LGBTQ movement has hijacked the civil rights movement. Have a long discussion with Voddie about that. But before we get into that, and Voddie touches down here, I want to spend some time talking about an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and it's why I've been so thrilled that Tim has wrangled up a group of coaches so we can have this discussion, because for me, if anybody that watches the show, I have gone to great detail to try to explain to people that the YMCA, the Young Men's Christians Association, that organized sports around the globe. There's a Christian component to organized sports. And we've moved completely away from that, and I think it's now become, because again, people, I'm sure these guys are really old, except for Greg. Well, Greg Kampe's actually old too.
He's older than I am.
41 years. But when you started out in coaching, it was about reaching young men, and it wasn't about getting rich. It was about, hey, I love sports, and I can use my love of sports to try to mentor and develop young kids as men. And now the entire sport, all of the sport, it's just about money. And it's very frustrating for me, and I think for a lot of sports fans. And so we will have that discussion here in about 30 seconds, but I do want to tell some of our VIPs and sponsors that are here, guys, we have a great meal for you from Puckett's that is awesome, and so you don't have to just sit there and stare at us. You can also eat. It's a great meal for you. You can do that as well. And I want to thank our primary sponsor, Preborn. Got to spend a lot of time with Dan Steiner and his group that are here in town to support us the entire weekend. You guys know that part of our mission with Fearless is our worldview that life begins at conception. And that's very important. That's a very important mindset that will carry on for the rest of your life, and it determines how you view much of the world. And so I just want to thank Dan Snyder and the crew from Preborn for always supporting me and what we're doing at the Fearless Movement. Also want to thank Coveted Eyes. They've jumped on board as a sponsor. You guys have heard me talk about Coveted Eyes and their Victory platform and all the things they can do to help you drive safely on the information superhighway. You know, you hop in a car, you need a seatbelt. You hop on the internet, for guys like me, got lust issues, I need a seatbelt. There's way too much porn on the internet. Coveted Eyes can help you fight that battle, and how they try to seduce us with pornography. I couldn't be more proud to be connected with Coveted Eyes. It's a great resource. You guys should check that out. And then also, I got to meet, you guys hear me talk about John Hewlett and Cardio Miracle, and this is my first time getting to meet John Hewlett in person. He's here, he's got a bunch of samples. He'll be here all weekend, and his crew, and we'll have him on stage tomorrow. But they got a bunch of samples of Cardio Miracle. You guys hear me talk about it all the time, about elevating and balancing your nitric oxide level and all the different health benefits you can get from that. I mean, you guys sitting here in the audience, look how good I look. I mean, it's amazing how good I look. Everybody that I shook hands with was like, wow, Whitlock, I almost mistook you for Denzel Washington. Cardio Miracle. It's Cardio Miracle. It'll make you look better, too, and not just feel better. It won't just, on a more serious. Anyway, you've heard me talk about cardio. So I just want to thank our sponsors that are here with us today. Thank you, VIPs, for the support you've given. You make all this possible. Now, without further ado, I'm going to transition into a conversation about mentoring men in college sports. And I think this actually even trickles down to high school sports and junior high sports. The amount of money and autonomy and freedom that athletes now have, because the transfer portals goes on in high school and junior high as well. And so, Tim, get us rolling here. What are the biggest challenges for coaches now as it relates to mentoring and discipling young athletes?
Well, I think that they're staring at a situation that they've never faced in their lives, because sometimes mentoring means correcting or disciplining, and with the freedom that players have and their ability to move, sometimes it means that you can't take them out of their comfort zone, which they need in order to get better. I think that's the way everybody gets better. You go through a little adversity and you grow. And I think a lot of coaches here for the last few years have had to say, okay, I may only have him for a year, but I'd like to have him for 3 years, so maybe I back off. And, okay, so he missed 4 classes. Do I sit him and discipline him? Is he going to be gone and leaving me if I discipline him? Because players are tending to just say, I don't have to put up with this, I can go someplace else. So some coaches, I think, have maybe acquiesced. Greg can speak to this better than I can, and become clappers and cheerleaders and pom-pom guys, versus given that tough love that you really have to have at times, not all the times, but at times, to get a guy to grow.
Listen, Greg, I do want you to speak to that, because I'm not going to call names, but everybody knows what my favorite college is. It's Ball State University. I love Ball State. And I'm not going to call names, but we had a coach that I literally, without ever having talked to you or anybody else, I was like, man, they've turned him into a clapper. And every decision that he makes, the transfer portal's in the back of his head. He's everything. It's like, oh, this guy just turned the ball over for no reason, didn't pick up defensively like he should. But I could see him in real time like, man, if I do this, this could affect me in the transfer portal. And so he just mostly clapped. Greg, how do you combat that?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think it's a question that each coach has to answer themselves. I think a lot of the younger coaches will turn into the clapper that you're talking about, because they're looking for their future and what they have down the road, and winning is important. Obviously, you know, by winning, they're going to have a longer career, make more money in your career and that. And I think one of the things that's totally obvious to anybody sitting up here is that you have to have great players if you're going to win. You know, I can take your players and beat you, you could take my, those things are all statements. The truth of the matter is you have to have good basketball players. And so how do you keep those players? And that's a big question we all have to ask ourselves. Me personally, I'm going the other way. I love coaching. I love what I do. I do it for one reason, and that's to turn 18-year-olds into 22-year-old men. Now, I may not have them at 22 when I brought them in at 18 anymore. Probably not going to. So we're going to just kind of bump it up a little bit, and we're only going to bring in 20 and 21-year-olds now. We're not going to recruit the high school kid. We're not going to recruit those guys because we don't want to be the Toledo Mud Hens of college basketball. So I've got 1 or 2 years now to accomplish what I accomplished in 4 years for so many years. I'm at peace with that. I understand it. It's the way it is. You adapt or you die, correct? So we're going to adapt, at least, my staff and I am. We're still believing what Tim said. We think that the young men of today have been bubble wrapped, that everybody's afraid of failure. And everybody, we see this young man and think this guy's got a chance to do something in this sport. So we're going to help him and we're going to, shepherd him through, and all these people are around him and they bubble wrap them, right? Well, when I get them, we have to take that bubble wrap off because you're not going to be successful in life unless you fail. And we want failure. We want you to learn you can't do that against this particular player, or you can't make this play. The difference is now how do we react to helping them, right? 5 years ago, I would get in their face. I would, as Tim said, and I think all the coaches here did it the same way because that was the successful way in our day and age. You can't do that today. But you still have to get the same message across, and there's ways to do that. It's just...
How?
How?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I do it in an individual way. I will bring that kid in after practice. I will sit with him individually instead of in what he thinks is an embarrassing situation. If I go after a kid in a game, and how can you do that to me in front of everybody? My answer to him is, those people in the stands think I'm the asshole. All right? They don't think you are. They feel bad for you that this coach is coming after you, okay? That's how it used to be. Today, I don't do that. What I do is I bring him and I talk to him. I say, okay, what is your goal? What do you want to accomplish? How are you going to get there doing it the way you're doing it? We're here for one reason, to make you be the best you can. You want to have these dreams, we're going to help you reach those great dreams. But you're going to have to let me coach you because I've done this for 40 years and I know how to get you there. And I go over the players I've had that are there, right? I show them, in the old days, if somebody said something to you, your dad would have told you, you do what that coach said. If he says jump, you say how high, right? Today, if you say jump, they want to know, well, why do I have to jump? What's the reasoning for that? Well, instead of fighting that, I'm pulling them aside and I'm showing the reasoning for why I'm coaching them this way. And then I end every conversation. Do you want this? Do you want me to coach you this way? These are your dreams. These how I think I can get you there. And you came here because I told you all this when I recruited you. So are we going to continue this, or are you going to go off on your own?
Kermit, my thought is, as retired coach and as experienced as you are in the college game, you could probably speak for a lot of current coaches that would love to be able to say what they really, really think, and you probably hear them complaining about like what they used to be able to do. What do you see from your vantage point? Are you glad that you're out and retired and you got to coach during a different era, or do you mostly just feel sorry for your friends that are still?
Well, Jason, we all miss coaching. I miss coaching. I don't miss the part that the people are so unhappy when you talk to all the coaches around college basketball right now. They're going through the transfer portal. I look back, I think how important, even it's been my whole coaching career, it's a big component of your show, Jason, is the parenting, is the people around the players. And never in a point in time are so many different voices not only going to the players, but going to the parents. And, you hear Danny Hurley talk about a big part of his recruiting is obviously getting to know the parents even more, and trying to understand their thought process. Will they back him up in tough times when their kid is not going to play as well? I just still think that kids still want structure. I do. But like Greg said, there's a different way to deliver that message. 2 years ago, I was coaching at Ole Miss, and I saw it changing at that particular time. But I would have to think that right now, not only you're talking to the player, but now you're dealing with the agent that you have to talk to on a daily basis. The agents was taboo back in our day. Agents couldn't be anywhere close to your team. AAU coaches, but the parents are the ones. I think in a lot of these situations, Jason, the kids don't want to leave. But I think it's the outside influence of the parents and the agents that are involved that are really he likes his situation, but he almost feels pressured to do so. So, to give advice to young coaches, you just got to adapt to the different times. But still, I think you got to coach to your heart. And I thought a biggest strength in my first job was working for Tim at the University of Idaho in 1986. Tim was very talented. I worked for John Brady at LSU. I worked for Larry Eustachy. Think about that. 3 of my very best friends in life. I was assistant coach for all 3.
You worked for Larry Eustachy?
I worked for Larry at Utah State, John Brady at LSU, and Tim at Idaho. So, I'm warped a little bit, Jason, okay?
Yeah.
So, but I learned so much, but I think a strength of all of ours was the fact that we were demanding and direct to young people. And now, I thought at Ole Miss my last year, probably one of my biggest strengths was taken a little as a disadvantage because I couldn't hold guys maybe as accountable as I used to be able to do it.
Well, were you involved with Larry's man bun? Were you involved in that decision making?
No, but we were all hoping he was going to wear it here. We were all hoping. We were keeping our fingers crossed, and I asked Tim, I said, Tim, tell me. He goes, he cut it. I said, gosh almighty. I didn't want him to cut it, Jason.
John, the NCAA just made an announcement that schools are going to start directly paying the athletes. Uh-huh. And there's some of us that are a tiny bit hopeful, like, well, maybe this will add some structure and we'll see less name, image, and likeness, less boosters, less behind-the-scenes deals going on. But do you think this is going to be a good thing, the schools directly paying the kids, or will it just increase the chaos?
Those are questions that are going to be answered down the road, I think. But from what I understand, the schools are like in the SEC, like LSU, for instance. If they take 20% off the top of their total revenue, that's $20 million they're going to use to give back to the athletes. I think they're trying to diminish the NIL to a degree, but I don't see schools giving up the NIL. I think some schools will try to protect the NIL to give more money in case the $20 million spread out over football, basketball, and however they choose to dish it out to cover some of those things they may need more money for. But I agree with Greg a little bit in terms of dealing with players today with all of that sort of thing going around. Particularly, money changes everything, as you know. But I think the more time you spend with players now individually helps you be able to coach them maybe in a more direct way. I think players today are insecure because of all the noise that's going on. Everything they hear, it makes them insecure. They don't know who to turn to when it gets difficult. Used to, the coach was a guy they would turn to. And to sit up here and listen to you and know these guys, I don't have all the answers as a coach. I made some mistakes as a coach. I was kind of a Nolan Ryan fastball guy. I threw it right at you, and you either got it or you didn't. Some guys left me, some guys stayed. But as a coach, I always thought we were there to kind of fill in the blanks of where the parents weren't doing what they needed to do. I had a thing on my wall where behind me on my desk, it said, you get what you tolerate. And I always thought if I didn't tolerate little things, I wouldn't get negative things back. And then I think the whole problem we have now is coaches, with all of this is going on and giving them money, it's got coaches back on their heels a little bit. And they're not coaching to their personality. They're coaching in a way that they think the kid may not leave, the young man may not leave. But I still think, Jason, in today's world, and even in the championship, when I watch the NCAA tournament and the teams that get to to that level of play, win a national championship, or get to the Final Four, there are some things that are still uncompromisable. If you're going to have a quality team, you've got to be able to handle adversity. You've got to be able to have a competitive nature that drives you to be better than you thought you could. All those things are they're uncompromisable because championships teams still possess the same kind of intangible qualities, in my opinion. Now, how you get your team there may be a different approach for coaches today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. Coach Kampe and I had this conversation. I think now the coaches who can put together a team in a shorter period of time now are maybe the coaches that are able to make a championship team provided the talent is somewhat equal. You know, used to we would recruit, bring in freshmen, have them for 2 or 3 years, watch them grow and develop, and get that coaching feel good as their mentor. Now with everything that's changed the transfer portal, bringing players in the spring and having to make a winning team or a championship team in 4 or 5 months, I think the coaches that adapt and the coaches that can do that in a shorter period of time, put together transfers and make a championship team, I think there's something special about that. And I don't know if I could do it with my personality. But certainly, I think the other point that I want to make is the accountability aspect of what we're doing now seems to be less than it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago. You know, when Kermit was with me at LSU in our team room, we had a message on the backboard. As soon as you walked into our team meeting, it said responsibility plus accountability equals success. And as a coach or anybody in charge of people, you can tell people what they're responsible for, but the tail end of that is to hold them accountable for what you told them so they grow and get better, to have a chance at success. And I think in today's world, sometimes coaches, if they're going to hold them accountable, they may have to do it in a different way, spending more time, coaching them along, having more individual meetings to elude some of the insecurity I think that players have today.
Because this is such an experienced group, you're the perfect people for me to ask this question. And someone raised their hand if they want to be first to answer this question. But I can remember 1993 or 94, at a Final Four or at an event, the black sports writers used to get together with black college basketball coaches and have a little conversation or session. And I can remember I was asked to speak at this. And I can remember in 93, 94, I stood up and challenged the coaches to change the amateurism system. Like, hey man, this is a thing that's boiling and bubbling, and it's like if this amateurism thing doesn't get crushed, and we keep just pushing it off, and coaches keep making more money, and the media keeps talking about how the kids are getting screwed over, if there's no correction here, this thing's going to explode into chaos. And I can remember Big John Thompson, who I had a great deal of respect for, he got up and told me to shut up. And, and just, you know, just put me in my place. I was a young guy in my early, mid-20s, late 20s or whatever, and he just told me to shut up. And, you know, John Thompson reminded me, my dad was never that big, but they just had similar personalities. And so I gave him that respect, and I sat down and I shut up. But I always was writing for years, like throwing out ideas of, hey, here's how you could share some of the money with the athletes without creating chaos and while creating incentives to make them go to class, and tying some of the money to, like, hey, you get X amount of dollars when you graduate, things like that. I'm a former, you know, mid-major college football player, so I had all these ideas. And so I'm asking you all, it feels like the neglect and just no one ever forcing the NCAA or the system to change is why we got to this level of chaos. It seemed like if we had started this 30 years ago and figured out a proper way to share the money with the players while tying it to academic success, we wouldn't be in this chaos. And so I'm just, and I'm asking this, and I like and respect all of you, and literally Tim is one of my favorite people I've met in the past 3 or 4 years. So I say this with respect, but part of me is like, I feel like, man, these guys were just happy. They just kept their mouth shut because they were making a lot of money, and just like, it's too big for me to address or to even say anything because, I could lose my job.
Well, I think that there's been so much change, and people talk about the Wild Wild West and the chaos, and I think all that's true. And I think you were right in 93, 94 to say it could become that, because it has become that. And I think all of us got into coaching. None of us were making any money when we got into coaching. We didn't get into coaching for money, and it was about the kids. It was about the relationship. It was about trying to make young people better, have them get degrees, those relationships. But yeah, to compete and to win, and you needed good players. But it's changed so dramatically, and the media has fed this. You're right. Those guys are feeding it. And when you listen to the media, if you're in a leadership position, oftentimes you end up joining the media. There has to be some leadership. And I think the leadership that we had was not good. I think that what should have happened was listen to the voices and then throw out some plan to compensate the players, which needed to be. But now there's a lot of schools that couldn't afford to and still can't afford to compensate the players. But name, image, likeness, as it was intended to be, was a good thing. Being able to work, which was a good thing. The addition of the after meals and all that kind of thing, which led to about $13,000, was a good thing. The Pell Grants were there. People devalue the value of a scholarship. I didn't have a father when I went to college. My mother worked in a bookstore. And by the way, I think I was a better player than Kermit or John. I can't speak to Greg, but I was no good. I was no good, and I didn't deserve any compensation at all. I know they didn't. I've seen them play.
Hey man,
but anyhow, I think just to compensate.
Right.
That's one thing. I think
That was never. Just to clarify, I was a mediocre mid-major college football player. I felt like I got a fair deal. I got a free education. I would have never saw a college campus if I couldn't play a little bit of football. Ball State did great by me. Didn't deserve to be paid. I don't think most of the players, even at the Power 5, I don't think most of them deserve to be paid.
Right.
There was, to me, it's the handful of pro prospects. There's about you guys correct me, there's about 100 guys playing college basketball every year that have a shot at playing in the NBA.
35 that are going to get paid Americans, because the top 45 players get paid, 15 guys in the second round, okay? 35 Americans, 10 from overseas a year, okay? They have the option
But that
to go
number's
pro.
increasing overseas draftees. They're taking them more now.
Yeah, they have.
But I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you're getting way off what you're talking about, because you hit it on the head. When you said media, the media is right, but it's social media. Social media has changed. They were the change agent to what's happening, because before social media, before Twitter, before Instagram, before all that stuff, where people would reach out and have these, opinions and statements that kids cling to, these things were just talked about, but never. A college education was worth something. I had a son go to the Berklee College of Music. I paid, what's 80 times 4?
320.
I paid $320,000 for that young man to get his education. That's a lot of money. Every player I've had that comes through, we pay for their education. That was a value 15, 20, when you were in school. That was a value. So in the powers that be, in their eyes, when you made that statement in the 1990s, the powers that be said, we're giving these kids hundreds of thousands of dollars by giving them scholarships. So Slowly, we added cost of attendance. Okay, so our players get $3,000, $4,000 a year to pay for their toothpaste and things like that. Slowly, we've added the Austin Awards. Slowly, the Pell Grant, where these kids are making money. But without social media, none of this explosion would have happened because everybody would have been happy with that. But with social media saying, look at how much money the University of Michigan football program's making, and why aren't the players, and you should get part of that, and people around, and now we're going to sue. All this has happened because the NCAA lost lawsuits. And the turn about all this is we're tired of being in the court.
My thought on that, I don't think when Ed O'Bannon filed a lawsuit and all this started and went through the courts for these number of years, that he was hoping that they would get $300,000 or $500,000 to go play college basketball. NIL is name, image, and likeness. Some of these guys are getting paid for a name, image, and likeness. They've never bounced a ball or made a basket or threw a pass or made a tackle. So what kind of image and likeness do they have they created for themselves? I just don't like the idea of giving anybody anything that they haven't earned or deserved. I think it's giving the wrong message and teaching the wrong things. You know, they always say, well, and the coach I know personally, I was with him at LSU for 3 years, Nick Saban. You know, let's use him as the top dog in coaching any sport. Well, he's earned the right to make the money he made based on what it allows. He earned that. His first coaching job, he didn't make any money. He earned that. He produced and earned it, and now the market allows him to make that kind of money. And more power to him. I think that's the American way. But to give somebody something before they've even proven themselves and created a situation where they show value and create value for themselves by the way they play, I think that's not right, and I think it teaches the wrong things.
I just don't think, Jason, I think, you know, the leadership, when we saw Ed O'Banion's case coming for 20 years, and I think what you said about tying money into academic performance and on the back end, I just think that the NCAA and the leadership let it hit it just like a truck. Instead of getting the federal government involved early on and have them put their arms around it and try to put some guard gates. It's not even NIL anymore. It's just pay for play. So NIL, they shouldn't even use it. The pay for play, NIL is not the problem. It's the transfer portal. I mean, it hit in a perfect storm. If the transfer portal was still like it was when we coached, this would not be an issue. Kids that are coming out of high school, the great ones would get the number, but why the value has gone up because kids got all the leverage and they can leave. And that's why a guy that should make $15,000 or $20,000 will make $100,000 or $150,000. And Greg just had a guy just leave to go to Washington to make X amount of money. So it really is. It's the transfer portal is the whole thing. You know how it started? You know how the transfer portal started? Lon Kruger's son was at Arizona State. Lon gets the job at UNLV. His son graduated from Arizona State, and Lon petitioned to the NCAA to have his son come play for him at UNLV 100 years ago. And so he came as a grad transfer. And from that point on, it crept with grad transfers, and that's how kind of the portal started. So really, Jason, but the leadership, everybody says, okay, transfer portal. Well, that's just what the university presidents did. The Pac-12, the guy at USC, what did he do? He said, I'm going to transfer to the Big Ten. Why? For more money. So everybody's taken a precedent in it from the leaderships of all the university campuses.
But you know, Kermit, I would say this. I think the transfer portal, yes, but I think the NIL and the transfer portal are intertwined. Because we got the portal and guys can leave whenever they want to leave as long as they're academically eligible to go to the next school. Guys playing 4 years, 4 different schools. 5 years, 5 different schools. But this is what's going on as you guys are talking about the agents. Every kid's got an agent.
Yeah.
And the agents are calling the coach. Your guy, scored 16 points last night, and he's making $15,000. Coach, we're going to have more money. What are you going to be able to do? Well, he averaged 7 points last year, and he's playing a little better this year. Are you going to be able to get that up to 100? Well, Coach, we'll talk about it, this and that. Picks up the phone, calls Kansas, calls Colorado State, calls whatever. My player can do this for you. Can you get 100,000? Boom. He comes back to the coach. All right, here we go. we're leaving. So the money and the portal both working hand in hand, and
Well,
it's
I asked Jason, I asked Coach Kampe about how do you know as a college coach today when some agent calls you and his player is playing over at wherever other school, he wants to transfer to your school, how do you really know what that school is paying him? It's not common knowledge. It's not open for everybody to see. So you told me you don't know.
No, yeah, and they lie.
And they lie.
They lie.
That's
They
what
tell
makes
you,
it
they offered
difficult
me this.
to really know what the value is of a player. But, you know, we had, when I travel with LSU now and do their broadcasts on the radio for them, and we had this guy, Joe Burrow, as a quarterback, and I can see a guy like Joe Burrow, an image and likeness that he created for himself at LSU, benefiting in a way that brings value to him from a money standpoint because of what he accomplished. And that's my whole point here is we're giving players something they haven't done anything. Joe Burrow should be able to get money selling his jersey out of the bookstore, or going to speak, or getting a billboard, because he earned that. I don't like what's going on by giving players something that I don't think they've earned yet.
But you know, if you were a good player, John and Greg had 3 in the last 2 years go to Washington, go to Arizona, a lot of money, okay?
Yeah.
And you're the parent of a kid who's a good player. Given that there's no guardrails at all, and I get a kick out of the people that push for all this, and then all of a sudden they say, we need guardrails, we need rules, we need whatever. And the lawsuits that you talked about keep coming. But if you're the parent of that kid and the market is like wide open, you almost have to say, go put your name in. And that's what they're doing, right?
But it's not life-changing money. That's what people don't understand yet. That's what the kids don't understand yet. It's not life-changing money. My kid left me, and supposedly he got $500,000. Well, the agent gets 20%. It's down to $400,000 after taxes, which they have no clue what taxes are when you're 19, 20 years old. Now it's down to $240,000. Now you buy your Escalade. Now it's down to $100,000. Now everybody knows you got money. You're buying all the beers for everybody at the parties. In 2 years, all you have left is a used Escalade. It's not life-changing. And what's life-changing for the kid is, I went to this school, this school, this school, and this school in 4 years, and I got this amount of money, but guess what I'm not going to have? I'm not going to have my degree. Because if you transfer, I don't care what school. I had a son go to the University of Cincinnati, the number 4 or 5 business school in the country. He was a 3.5 plus student. He transfers back to Oakland for his senior year. Oakland's a really good school with a really good business school. Cincinnati's ranked in the top 5. There were 4 classes that Oakland wouldn't take that he got A's in. I had to pay for 4 classes for that kid. All right? Well, if Oakland's not taking 4 from Cincinnati, I don't know what Arizona's taking from Oakland. I don't know what Washington, kids are going to go to 4 schools, and after 4 years, they're going to be well more than a year away from graduating.
We have an instant gratification culture.
Yes.
And so, I used to be young, you guys used to be young. We all had a little bit of that instant gratification mentality, and so it's hard to see that far down the road. I think Tim and Kermit, from my perspective, it's just bad leadership. And when I say bad leadership, I'm not just talking about the NCAA. I'm talking about, if I care about basketball, if I'm Adam Silver and David Stern, and I care about American basketball, the leadership in the NBA is bad, the leadership in the NCAA is bad, because the NBA here in America has been hurt by all the damage that's been done to college basketball. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson brought huge brands to the NBA and brought fan bases with them to the NBA. Same thing we're seeing with Caitlin Clark. She's bringing a brand and fans, and all of that has been destroyed because you go out and build a brand in college basketball, and then you carry that to the NBA, and it helps the overall health of the game. And just when you really think about the greatest players of all time, from Tim Duncan to Michael Jordan to Larry Bird, they all spent 3 or 4 years in college learning how to compete. And you sent 21 and 22-year-olds off to the NBA who had a foundation that a Greg Popovich or a Phil Jackson or whomever could work with. And so that part of my argument was, and you guys, I look at a tension, an adversarial relationship between the NBA and college basketball. And so a lot of my ideas about what we should have been doing is there should have been a partnership between the NBA and college basketball where my estimate, 100 legitimate NBA prospects that are in college basketball every year, they should do high-paid internships with the NBA because the NBA benefits from what you all were producing in college basketball, and so they should be like, okay, I'll pay a senior college basketball, I'll pay him $500,000 to stick in that last year and do what Caitlin Clark did, and then bring all those fans to me. Those are the kind of, I just have never understood like the adversarial relationship from the NBA and how the NCAA, they could never work together because it seemed like it's a good relationship that works for both sides, and now they've just torn the whole thing down. And so that's part of the reason I hate the NBA because, and it's a little bit of my disdain for the NFL even right now, but they have less of a problem because guys have to stay 3 years. But Tim, you obviously coached in the NBA for some time. I've never understood why the NBA wouldn't work with the NCAA.
I think the NBA would like to, but the NBA is a cooperation between the Players Association and the NBA. That's the collective bargaining agreement. And it's the agents that represent the players that want these young people to come out early. It's more players, more representation, more numbers, more people. And
easier to exploit too when they're younger and less educated.
That's right. So it's always been from the Players Association's perspective. When I was in the NBA, that first year was the first year, or the second year I should say, but the first year that there was a mass exodus from high school to the pros prior to the one and done. It was right after Kevin Garnett and Kobe Bryant. And the first 11 of 12 players picked in the first round that next year were all guys that were high school players. Kwame, what was his name?
Kwame Brown.
Kwame Brown. And,
good friend of mine.
And that group.
He gets very upset. Don't say anything bad about it.
No, I wouldn't say anything negative. Nothing. Kwame, yeah, bring it on, Kwame. But the NBA found two things. One, they weren't really ready, but what you said, they couldn't brand and market these guys, sell the suites, sell the tickets. So they really, really pushed for, okay, the 1 year, one and done. And LeBron's class was the last group of that. But, they would all benefit from being at a place 4 years. Maybe those days are all done, but it's an era right now where this particular time in college athletics, there really are no rules. There really are no rules. It is chaos, and it's more professional than professional athletes. They have more options, the players, and more leverage than they do in the NBA. They have contracts in the NBA. They have two-way contracts in the NBA. They know they have to be there for 3 years or 4 years, and those things are going to have to be addressed and worked out. Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, please.
Because Coach touched on it. The academics and the 4 years. The thing that's really driving me crazy, this whole conference realignment and these universities that hide behind the integrity of the universities, and we're all about academics. I don't want to hear the term student athlete anymore. I don't want to hear it. You got Stanford and California, University of California, two of our premier academic institutions in this country, and they're joining the ACC. They've got to go to the East Coast to go play everybody that they're going to play. Okay, football, yeah, you can go make 4 trips, 4 weekends and 4 home games, okay? But what about all the Olympic sports? What about baseball, all those people? All these things that are coming down with the pay for play, they're going to eliminate scholarships, eliminate teams. And then what Coach said is so true. The more you transfer, the more hours you lose. So let's just stop all the hokey pokey about whatever. It's pay for play, and the student athlete is not where it is until they get it reined in.
Well,
What you're talking about now, though, Tim, is football driven and money driven. That's the only reason they're moving and doing that, is because the stronger the football, the more money, the more exposure. And that's why all that's taking place there, the high major schools in football. And you know that, Coach.
Oh,
Yeah.
the big thing I was going to say is look at the demographic of the athlete that's going to be hurt the most by not graduating. And you're going to look at the graduation rates in 4 or 5 years, and you're going to see the African American graduation rate of student athletes, which are much higher percentage in basketball and football than they are in the Olympic sports. And that graduation rate's going to go down to 20, 18%, 23%, and then Congress is going to step in. Because back in the early 200s, when that graduation rate was down in those levels, they stepped in and put the APR in.
Yep.
And the APR changed everything, and now the graduation rate went from 20% to 72, 74% of African American athletes, and everybody was, look what we did is good. Well, now it's going to go right back down there, and what's going to happen?
And can I say this? Could you tell the audience what APR is about? Retention.
Right.
Retention. They put that in, and they're penalizing schools not going to the tournament for retention. But what has the NCAA done now? They've incentivized transferring. They've incentivized it with money. They've incentivized it by saying you can leave every year and be automatically eligible, but now go back and penalize coaches, penalize schools, say you can't go to the tournament because of retention? I mean, that's insanity.
Well, now it's financial. They've suspended much of the you can't go to the tournament. And what they do is they're financially penalizing schools if your APR is, dropped below 950. But the big key in that is that they also dropped, it was when I lost a kid, if a kid left me and transferred and his GPA was below a 2.5, I lost a point. Now they've dropped it all the way to a 2.0.
Yeah.
So again, they're understanding what's going on, but what's hurting is the kid.
But they're having this retention rule in, and it's like saying, okay, it's raining outside. Kids, go outside and play. Go outside and play. We've incentivized, y'all go ahead. And then they come back in and they're muddy, and then you jump on them for coming back inside and they're muddy after all that. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Greg, here's where I would push back a tiny bit, just because I'm the media person, and I can't remember the last time I've read a story or seen any focus on APR or graduation rates. That seems like that was something they used to do a decade ago, 15 years ago.
Because we got it where everybody, the APR worked. So many things in my 46 years of being in college basketball have come down the pipe, and most of them don't work. That worked. Those and I was against it when it went in, but those graduation rates went. And we as coaches, we were so fearful of the NCAA tournament being taken away from us that we worked at that APR thing. We knew every rule. We knew everything you had to do. A kid's going to leave, but he's a 2.3. I'm going to pay for you to stay here, son, in the summer, and we got to get you above a 2.5. It was really good literature for a student athlete. And because those rates went up so high, and you don't even hear about it anymore because it's not a problem.
But it's
going to be
becoming a problem now.
I'm so cynical, I just think they'll ignore it.
You don't what?
I'm so cynical, I think they will ignore it. I don't think we'll ever hear about APR or any of that ever again.
Jason.
Yeah.
You know what they're doing now, Jason, on campuses? Now, they're inventing new degrees to get these transfers in. You start looking at degree plans, and everybody has to declare a degree. And I won't say names of schools.
General studies.
It'll just be they all the generals. Think about it, Jason. When you transferred after a second year, you had to have 40% towards your degree. After the third year, 60%. After the fourth year, 80%. And like Greg said, you start transferring all these times, there's no way. So they're inventing at different campuses all across the country just degrees that we're just making a typical kind of a, whatever you call it, for all the hours that go through, just a typical degree, that those hours can transfer and all those kids are going the same degree.
I wish I just saw a meme over Twitter in the past 2 weeks about exactly what you're talking about. They showed a basketball team, and everybody
Houston.
had to. Yes.
Yeah.
And
And I'm not trying to sing out.
no,
Everybody's doing it.
No, I got.
Yeah,
I got. And Kelvin Sampson's one of my favorite people
Great guys,
and coaches.
yeah.
But you were exactly right. It's Houston. Everybody had the same major.
Yeah.
The exact same major. But Greg, I'm so cynical. I'm just telling you. I think they don't care. It'll never be discussed again. It could drop to 0%, and there'll never be a story about it or any
You
fun.
said what you said a while back. The value of the degree now is diminished.
Well,
The
when's the
value
last
of
time
the
you had a
education,
parent?
The value of the getting an education and graduating, that's so diminished now with whatever else is going on.
Because it's all transactional and money.
that's right.
Kermit, you just coached year ago. Greg, you're coaching right now. How many parents have called you lately and said, hey, look, Johnny's got a big English class coming up here. There's a big test here on Sunday. Now, is he getting tutoring? Is he really worried about it? You go on a home visit. Hey, look, we want him to get a degree. We've got to have him out working. We want him not living here at this house. He's got to have. Does that even come up anymore?
It's not even, Greg, it's not even a component of the official visit anymore. It was such a big piece when somebody'd come visit Ole Miss and just the academic center and sell it and the tutors and unlimited and all the different things. They don't even take them to the academic centers in a lot of the visits now. It's just shorter visits because there's just 2 or 3 things that matter. And the academic piece, you're right, it's going to go away completely.
That's why I'm cynical. It's just because they don't
Can I say
care.
something to that?
Yeah.
Here's my preaching, okay? There's 2 big problems. And these 2 problems don't, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But if these 2 problems don't get fixed, none of this is ever going to get fixed. Number 1, and it goes to why you're cynical, is leadership. Leadership has to change, and most importantly, we have to get back to respecting leadership. There is no respect for authority anymore. You don't have to agree with it, but nobody respects it. And so, and again, I go to social media. And then the second thing is we have devalued the team. You know, Bo Schembechler would roll over in his grave, the team does not exist today. It doesn't exist in kids that you recruit. It's what can you do for me? And it's not the kid. It's everybody around the kid that is pushing this narrative. You only get one chance, son. You got to find out what's best. You're going to go here, and you're going there for a year and see how it goes and get everything you can get. That coach is making millions. That school's making millions. You got to get yours. And that's what's been fed to players. That's what's been fed to the social media. That's what's been fed to the fans, and the fans are pissed off. They're upset about it, okay? But the lack of interest in being part of a team. I had a great team this year. I may never have another group of kids like this. They were the most unselfish, unentitled, selfless group of kids I've coached in 20 years, and that's why we won. Not one of them cared that the other one would get any amount of money. Not one of them cared. All they wanted to do was be together and win. I think that's a dying breed. We have to change that, and the only way we're going to change it is through leadership. But who wants to be a leader when no one respects leadership? And this isn't just in athletics. It's a nationwide problem right now.
Greg, it's a perfect segue to the last thing I want to talk with this group about. Charles Baker, I know you probably weren't expecting to come up on stage, but I am going to want you to come up on stage because Charles and I are friends for a long time. Charles been a college basketball recruiter and assistant forever, can speak to this. Larry Eustachy is also here, former college head coach. And Larry, I don't know if, Larry of course remembers because Larry was an assistant at Ball State when I was a student at Ball State. So Larry and Charles, I want you guys to prepare to come up. Tim and Greg will stay with me, but I do want, before those guys come up, I want to piggyback off Greg's point, which is my overall point. For you guys to come here and participate in this and to be familiar with me and to be familiar with what we do on the show, I'm making the assumption you have some sort of Christian faith, and that your faith probably played a role in how you approach coaching and mentoring and discipling kids. And one of the most troubling things for me, and I'm sitting here now even thinking, Voddie Baucham's going to come up here and have a conversation with me. He's going to speak tomorrow, but Voddie's a former college football player just like me. And there's so many concepts and principles that are applicable in sports that come straight from the Bible and a Christian worldview. And so I read things now where, and I can't think of the school, but I could have seen things where a coach got in trouble, a kid complained because the coach read something to him out of the Bible, and he felt like he was getting bullied, and it's like we've moved away from a Christian worldview. And as I said at the very beginning of this, the YMCA organized sports across the globe in the 1800s. The CYO, Catholic Youth Association, the primary driver in the integration of sports in America in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Without the CYO, what Jackie Robinson eventually did, it wouldn't have happened. We've moved completely away. There's such a hostility, particularly on college campuses, to any sort of religious worldview. That's where I get even more cynical. It's like it can't be fixed if you can't start from a point of view of there's biblical truth. There's some truth we're all agreed on and we're going to stand on. If you can't start there, I don't know how you ever get to a truth. I don't know how you ever get to a point where we respect leadership. I think about all the great coaches from my childhood, mostly from football, but even from basketball, Tom Landry and these guys, they all were connected to faith. And that's all, from my vantage point, you guys are more inside, that's all been eliminated publicly. I don't know what's going on with inside the team dynamic, but publicly that's all been eliminated, and I think it's part of the problem.
You know, we all have, even at just my last 5 years at Ole Miss, the spiritual coaches that come in. I think Jason was really positive, the amount of Christians you have on your team, players. It really, you know, that guys that are going to church. You know, when I was at Middle Tennessee, we used to take our players to a different church or denomination every 2 months in hopes of, obviously, maybe they can find a church in that community to get involved with. Alan Jackson, who's going to be on your program, World Outreach, is one of my favorite people, Jason, and I loved your podcast with him the other day when I watched it and listened to it. But now I got to Ole Miss, and I said, look, you have this time management. That's a certain amount on, okay? So I go in my first fall, I said, we have to fill out a time management that we're going to take our team on Sunday to a particular church in Oxford, and they said you can't do it because Sundays are required for a day off, and you can't organize your guys to take them to church. I mean, just from over just a little time management NCAA piece that we did, I just thought all those things were really, really important, you know. And a lot of my guys that we took them to churches, they did. They found a pastor they like and a church they like and kind of a second home within that community. And you know what? And it grew over 2, 3, and 4 years of them being a part of the community.
Well, some of the best teams, I was telling Coach, some of the best teams I ever coached were the most high-character teams that were made up of young people, really a lot of them from small-town Louisiana, that the values they were taught and the Christian faith, going to church being a big part of their character building, it's coincidental. Those were some of my best teams. And I don't think that'll ever change. That's why I'd say in championship teams, the intangibles it takes to win a championship, those things today are still uncompromisable. And I don't think Connecticut wins a national championship or goes back-to-back because they got bad guys on the team that don't understand what's right and what's wrong and that they're coached right. I think you can coach them in a different way now. But I think the character aspect of what you're talking about based on Christian beliefs is really important. And for me to sit here and say that, it's not like I live the perfect life either. I mean, there could be people throw darts at me by some things I've done. But at least I own up, man up on it, and take it. So
I've seen the video. Tim showed me a video of you in Las Vegas. I know what you're talking about.
what you do there, man? But I agree with you totally, Jason, totally.
One of the things that I try and do with my team is we have to believe in something bigger than us. And we discuss that, we talk about it, but we have to believe in something. And that's, obviously at a public institution, you have to walk a straight line with those types of things. But we have a lot of conversations. We pray before a game, we pray after a game. I've had Muslim players on my team. We've had discussions. I've had them talk about their religion to our players, to the players that weren't Muslim. I've had, we say the Lord's Prayer after a game. They're told they don't have to be part of that. And not once has a young man not wanted to be part of it. They don't have to say it, but we discuss it, we talk about it, and we talk about there are bigger things in life. And but it's all private. It's not something that we put any pressure on anybody. It's something that I think is very important in any team, though. Anytime you have a group of young men that are from all different areas of life, from all different social, economical backgrounds, that you have to discuss everything. And what you believe in and how you believe it and what your mother taught you and what your religion taught you, what your religion didn't teach you. You have to share and interact if you're going to become a family that we say we are when we're a team, right? We all get together and go 1, 2, 3 family, right? Every team does that. So if you're going to be a family, you have to have those discussions, and they have to be frank discussions. They can't be like you just said about this guy said that he was putting pressure on. There can't be any pressure or anything like that. We do it together. We speak out together. And I will say this, one of the things that we did years ago with getting a sports psychologist to come in and talk to our teams and players, and I think most universities do that now, that really opened some of the paths to be able to talk about things, because it wasn't coming from a guy of authority, it was coming from a guy that was just trying to help us become a family. And so I think those talks are very, very important, but in the end, the final word is, young men, you have to believe in something, and you have to come to grips with what you believe, and then believe in it.
Tim, I watched a lot of your Bulls teams, and I know some ministers in Chicago, and when you were coaching there, everybody was praying. I mean, everybody was praying because you were such an awful coach that...
I was praying too.
Yeah.
Please, let somebody walk through that door.
Please, somebody make a shot.
I actually was starting rumors at the end of my career that the players had turned on me, so they'd fire me. I was so miserable. But
I want to ask you a serious question, Tim, and I know, but I'm gonna be honest here for 1 second, and then delete this from the video because I don't want proof of this. Man, the way you supported me in this show, it's been incredible. I love you, man.
and I love you too, and these guys do too. We believe that your message is of the truth, and we believe that your message speaks for so many people that are worried about losing their jobs, so many people that are in the media that maybe even think like you but afraid to talk. We believe that your message resonates from the Spirit and to truths that aren't being spoken because of cancel culture. And we got off to a rocky start. I was at Iowa State, and you were the beat writer in Kansas City.
I was not a beat writer. I was the columnist. Don't
Well,
diminish
you were a columnist.
me.
Okay,
Don't
I'm
diminish
sorry
me.
I
Big
offended you.
difference,
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah, big difference.
And you lit me up a couple times, and I deserved it. I deserved it in retrospect. I didn't, but
Aren't you the guy that ruined Marcus Pfizer? I mean, he was.
No, that
headed
was
to-
Larry, your next guest.
Oh, Larry, I'm sorry, Larry.
Yeah, Larry,
Yeah,
the
my
next
bad.
guest that's
Well,
coming
yeah,
on. He's coming on, the guy without the ponytail. But no, Jason, I'm glad you're here in Nashville, and I'm glad we have a chance to reconnect in a different way, and we don't miss anything that you're doing, because you're really a unique voice in this country, and one that I know all of these men believe in.
So, John and Kermit, I'm going to ask you guys to exit stage left, and I want to get Charles and Larry up here. I know Charles, I don't know if I prepped Charles for this or if anybody told Charles. And Charles, if you don't want to come, that's fine as well, but I would love to have you up here. While we're waiting for these guys to change out, I do want Greg to spend a little time bragging on yourself and about what your team accomplished this year. It was one of the great stories of the NCAA tournament. You've been at Oakland University for forever. Did they mic you up already? You got a mic on? Oh, yeah, okay. That was quick. But I do just an incredible run for you guys and being a big part of the NCAA tournament this year. Share what you can about what that experience was like.
Well, I told our guys, you know, the night of Selection Sunday when we got Kentucky, I told our guys that this could be life-changing for you. You've got the bluest of blue bloods. You know the game will be, we didn't know the time of the game, but you knew it was either going to be Thursday or Friday night at 7 o'clock because that's when Kentucky was going to play. And we got Thursday night at 7 on CBS. You know, we just knew this could be life-changing for you. I knew I had a really good team. We had beaten Xavier at Xavier. We took Illinois to the wire at Illinois, which is for a non-league team to go to Illinois and be tied with a couple minutes to go. That just doesn't happen. We'd taken Ohio State to the wire. We just knew we were a really good team, and in the right moment, if we had to, you know, if we could, you get one chance, as Eminem said or sang or whatever that is, and this was your chance, and let's go do this, and it will be life-changing, and it has. It's changed the nature of Oakland. I'm so happy for our president and my boss, my AD, and the people at the school, and what it meant, and the state of Michigan I think the whole country embraced this. I didn't really know that Kentucky would be considered the Dallas Cowboys of the college basketball. I mean, everybody wanted us to win the game, and I didn't realize that until it was over. But the Detroit media and the whole state of Michigan embraced us like for a week. We were Michigan or Michigan State. You know, I mean, that was the type of celebrity status our players had, and the feel-good story of it was just tremendous. And you know, like I said, I've been in the business a long time, and it was just an unbelievable feeling and an unbelievable week. Because when you're with a school for so long, to see that school get what happened to it, I felt really good. And then for Jack Golke, you know, I mean, Jack Golke's going to be the face of that tournament for the next 10 years. They're going to show his shots. And at any time underdog wins a game, they're probably going to show Golke saying, "We're not a Cinderella." You know, I mean, it just, that tournament just changes lives. And we got to experience that, and it was unbelievable. And I just so happy for the players. I mean, what they got to go through in the week or 2 weeks that they had.
Greg, thank you so much for coming. Not that I'm done with you, but I do want to spend some time here with Larry and Charles. And Larry, I want to, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I say that sincerely. As a young coach at Iowa State, and you started out at Ball State, I had you pegged, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I was like, this guy might be the modern day Bobby Knight. He's very intense. He's got a real passion for the game. He's got a high basketball IQ. And so I'm not saying that to be offensive, because I was a Bobby Knight fan. I grew up in Indiana, so everybody there. So I'm saying that with respect. And I'm just wondering, could a Bobby Knight, that style of coaching, exist in this era we have now?
Well, first of all, I've been listening the whole time, and I do agree that you shouldn't have been paid at Ball State. But there is a guy out here named Brother McCurdy that should have gotten
He was paid at Ball State. That's why we ended up on probation. But go ahead.
He wasn't paid enough.
Yeah.
I would say no. To answer your question, absolutely not. No, you can't. I've seen Bobby's practices. He was a good friend. I think the way he coached throughout was wrong.
You think the way he
Was wrong.
Was wrong all the way?
Yeah, I think as personal as he got, I don't agree with that. You pegged me as a Bobby Knight. I wasn't that.
Gotcha.
Now, would I? Do I wish I could go back with the Christian values I feel like I've had? I've in the recent years. By the way, my wife's a huge fan of yours, and your show's a big part of our routine of listening to Voddie and you and would I like to go back and change some of the words I said? But
and again, I didn't mean the worst parts of Bobby Knight. I'm talking about the best part. And I'm 57. You got to be around the same age or a little bit older.
yeah, just a little older.
And so, look, I come from I'm football too, and so my football coaches at Ball State, Dave Magazoo, Larry Cooley, Paul Shadell. If I can rattle I got yelled at a lot because I was an idiot, and it just didn't bother me. I can't say that I loved it, but I actually appreciate it because I can all the things they said were actually true. And so maybe just being a football guy, Bobby Knight's approach, I couldn't have played for him, but it just wouldn't have bothered me.
Well, I've always thought that coaching is parenting. And look what's happening to our world now that we live in. I think victims are raising victims. I really believe that the parenting is way different than the way you were raised. And, you know, I can't add to anything what these experts in basketball said, but
We knew that. That's why we brought you on late. But go ahead.
But I will tell you, parenting has changed. And we're getting what we're getting, which is, you know, I mean, look at the Christian religion. I mean, it's being pushed out of this world. It's you know, from where you would know better than me, the percentage of Christians in the world at one time to where it is there's people that won't even admit that they're Christian because they're afraid to offend somebody. That's where we've gone to, and it's going further down the road. That way, as you know better than anybody. So, in a roundabout way, I just think that today's culture in anything, coaching, business, is soft. It's soft, and by being tough does not mean, you know, headbutting a player or you know, it's just being demanding, like Tim talked about. I mean, I've often thought that I could coach without saying a word, just sign language. Like, that's not good enough. Let's line it up and run. Or that's not, I mean, you really don't have to yell and scream to get your point across and put them in these uncomfortable positions. But the whole thing swings back to the generation we are now in, and the children, they're being rewarded for 8th place ribbons, and it's a product. College basketball is a product of the way these kids are being raised.
Larry, because, and Charles said, Todd, I'm going to get to you here in a second, but because you went there, Larry, and because Paris and I are so close, Paris McCurdy, for those of you watching at home, is one of the great Ball State basketball players. I know I'm the only one that follows Ball State, but he led a Sweet 16 team in 1990 that came a bucket away from beating those great UNLV teams. And Paris has been a lifelong friend of mine since 1986 or 87. And Paris and I have spent some time talking about you because you and Paris are so close. And he shared with me quite a bit about your faith journey. And I would love for you to spend some time just unpacking what Larry was a successful coach, high-profile coach, got in some controversies and had some issues or whatever. But walk us through your faith journey a little bit.
Well, I'm going to have to face. I'm going to have to face our Lord one day, and I'll never forget this. I will never forget when I was rocking and rolling it at Iowa State. Okay, back-to-back Big 12 champions, beat Kansas 5 times in a row. Coach,
Very lucky there. I covered those Kansas teams. I'm just trying to keep the record clear.
We eased up on them. Roy was, that was, okay, let's move on. You know, I always grew up wanting to be famous.
You grew up
Wanting to be famous.
wanting to be famous?
Always grew up wanting to be famous. And the Lord took me there. The Lord took me to be very famous. And I did not handle it the way the Lord would have wanted me to handle it. And I specifically remember standing on this court and talking, you know, thinking about God and understanding the Bible and saying, you know, I do believe that this is, we're destined, we're predestined, that this is supposed to happen. It was already written down. But didn't I have something to do with this? And bam, I went down. I went down for rightfully what I should have gone down for. Now, I went down for income tax evasion as opposed to murder. Some of the things I was doing, you know, off the court. But, you know, full disclosure here on your show, I'm a huge fan of yours. I mean, I will never forget that moment. And it popped in my head while I was praying a month ago. I'd never thought of it until a month ago. And if I'm making any sense at all, I remember staying on that court at Hilton Coliseum saying, thank you, Lord, but I know I have a lot to do with this. So kind of just move over. And not in that exact words, but I got the fame, and it is in the scriptures. You asked for it. God will give you what you want, as you know. And He gave me what I wanted, and I paid severely for it. Lost my wife, you know. I had to move and be away from my kids. So, but I do think I know I was used in a good way through, you know, my alcoholism, admitting that I was an alcoholic, and it helped a lot of people. So going full circle, you know, I'm thinking I'm all that, and I'm just another child of God, already determining where I'm headed, where I'm going, and the plan was the Lord's plan all along. If I'm making sense to you,
Of
if
course.
I'm making sense, and
All this happened to me.
yeah.
Go ahead. I talk about it all the time.
Yeah. So yeah. Was I? Yeah. It is playing out right now. We're sitting here the way it's supposed to be played out as we talk, and it's always been that way. And I know, and you know, you can get. We have egos as coaches. Not a lot of humility. I could keep rambling, but I was at Boise State this year, and my brother Paris was a part of that in talking about humility. I said, I need to be humbled. I need to move on and get over this through my Christian journey, and I sat on the back behind the bench. On the charter, I chose to take commercial with the managers. I walked into arenas where we had great wins. It was very humbling, and it brought me much closer to the Lord. It really did.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. We'll spend the weekend working on Paris's humility. He has none.
Yeah, we're
we'll
start with that chain of his.
Paris still looks like it's 1990, but I'm going to leave that alone. Charles, thank you so much for coming. Charles and I were great friends in Kansas City. Charles was an assistant at Kansas State. Charles has been an assistant for a lot of programs, and he's been a great recruiter and a great asset, confidant for a lot of head coaches. And Charles and I were talking before we came on stage here, and because Charles is someone that was very instrumental in my understanding of college basketball when I was in Kansas City and being a sports writer at the Kansas City Star. Charles is probably responsible for 5% of my success in Kansas City as it relates to covering college. Charles gave me a lot of good insight. He also gave me some bad information, and he also, Tim, did he ever tell you, there was some guy that was going to save the Kansas State program, some dude from Africa, 6'9", 6'10", guy that Charles recruited at the last minute.
Oh.
As Mark Schlereth here, and Mark taught me this saying, the kid Charles brought in from Africa couldn't play dead in a Western. I mean, who am I talking
We've
about?
all
Can you
got
remember that
those,
name?
Serge Felly.
Serge. But anyway, Charles.
Hey, the irony to that is he turned into a pretty good player after we got fired. and now he was a real smart kid. He has a dental practice in South Carolina now.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, he was in dental school over in the Ivory Coast, and he was 2 years in. And because they didn't have a basketball team, he could come over and play immediately. And but he lost 2 years of college, but for being a dentist, and no problem. He came over and he just made it right back up, and now he's got a successful business. But to your point, he wasn't. He was much better the 2 years after we left than the 2 years. I did Bob Huggins a favor, put it that way.
So, Charles, we were talking about just what is name, image, and likeness, transfer portal. What's it done to recruiting for a guy like you? How has it changed things for you as a recruiter?
Well, before I answer that, I'm going to go back to something y'all was saying earlier about Coach Knight. I personally think he's, him and Larry Brown, those guys are some of the greatest college coaches who ever lived, along with
Tim,
my mentor here.
Yeah. Also, we can blame Tim for Serge Felly, but go ahead.
I think Coach Knight will be even more successful today, and because I think it was Brady was talking about it earlier about being himself, and you don't think for 1 second because you have all this name, image, and likeness and transfer portal that Coach Knight would be different.
No.
But it wouldn't matter because Indiana was the type of university where you could lose 6 or 7 guys every year and they would have the resources to go replace him. So if he wanted to, he could be stocked with talent every year, and you wouldn't have to worry about him putting a soft team on the court because that just wouldn't have been his nature to bend for anybody. So I really think he'd have done just as good.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Let me add this bit of context. Charles works for Darrell Walker now at Arkansas Little Rock. He's still in the game. Now to my question about how are things different from back in the early 2000s, late 90s when you were at Kansas State?
And I'm sure they did this. You'd have meetings. You'd have meetings with your staff, and you could have meetings now based on who you're going to recruit for 2026, and some programs 2027, and let's get after these 9th graders, these 10th graders. Let's get after everybody. And we won the Ohio Valley Conference regular season this year, and we're sitting there and we were losing 1 kid. We got everybody coming back. And, we're feeling pretty good. And then it hit me, and I told Coach Walker, I said, Darrell, if you really want to know the truth about it, we have no idea who's going to be on our team until May the 2nd because the portal closed May the 1st. And we had a couple of guys go in, so it's not how many guys go in the portal, it's who goes in the portal. That makes the big difference. I mean, I know he'd love to have that power forward back that went up in the NCAA tournament. But so we're sitting there, and it's looking pretty good. Our whole league, you got
the top 15 players in the league made all conference, and we had 3 of them, and they're all coming back on April the 29th. And April the 30th, they're all gone. So we're sitting there on May the 2nd. We've got 7 guys on the team, and April the 30th, we had 12, and it was the returning team from a league that won the championship. And so the portal closes on May the 2nd. A dead period starts May the 22nd. We're in a dead period now. So basically, you got 20 days to try to, how do you get the time to know a kid? Now, you've gone from trying to have relationships and recruiting kids as 9th graders and 10th, and you can't, I heard him say this earlier, you can't do that anymore. Let me take you back about 5 years ago. We won the Sun Belt Conference when we were in the Sun Belt, and the whole team was returning. I mean, it was sophomores and freshmen, maybe a junior here or there. We're set for the long haul. On the way to the conference tournament, we're on a bus to New Orleans, and I'm looking at Darryl, and I'm going, they're not going to play this. They're not going to play this. He goes, well, I'm watching the Big East tournament on TV, and they're pulling them off the court. And it's like that. We're not going to play this tournament. We get to Pine Bluff and we get a call. We're not going to play the tournament. And everybody was all down, and I was happy we'd only gotten 40 minutes outside of town. But COVID hit, and that same year the COVID hit, they put in the transfer portal. So that great team that we thought we had, one guy ended up playing for Kansas State, one guy ended up playing for Arkansas. They're all over the place, so we're starting over. So let's do like we did with them. Let's go get some young kids. Let's bring them in, develop them, do this all over again. We go get some young kids. We take some lumps. The end of the year, they're all gone. The ones who played good put their name in the portal, went somewhere. The ones who didn't get to play that much they're mad at you because they didn't play that much, so they put their name in the portal, and they're gone. So you're starting over again. But this time we said, hey, let's go get the oldest guys we can find, preferably seniors. You got 1 year. If they got 2, fine. But at our level, and he can tell you this, you're not coaching a kid for 4 years anymore. That's just not happening. I say our level. Let me take that back. You realize Duke had 7 guys in the transfer portal this year. John Wooden couldn't build that dynasty at UCLA because somebody who he's bringing along to play when Mike Warren leave and those guys, where all of a sudden that guy don't have to wait anymore. He can go to Washington for $200,000-$300,000 and be their starting point guard. And so that's why I said it about Coach Knight. He could care less about what people would think nowadays, because in his mind, he'd be smart enough to know, well, I got these guys for 1 year anyway. So what difference do it make?
It's a great point. It's a sad point. I sit here and think about, I think, Tim Walton, shout out if Tim Walton's here. He was a great football player at Ball State. Yep, one of my teammates. Tim played with the Detroit Lions, and Tim is like family to me because we had those 4 years together at Ball State, and I sit there, and Tim, I'll probably mention this again tomorrow, but Tim had great influence over me, not so much when we were in college, but as I matured and started analyzing, like, what was Tim doing at Ball State that I wasn't doing? Because Tim was a great player. He was probably our best player on the team. He was the MVP my senior year. It's not that I didn't play, but I just didn't live up to my potential. And when I started, as an adult, when I started thinking about the guys that had more success than me, I was like, man, Tim read the Bible every day in the locker room. And it never left my mind. And I'm like, if we didn't have those 4 years together, could he have had that kind of impact on me? And that when I see these guys just jumping from school to school to school, and I think about Ralph Wise and Todd Fennell and Chuck Kelly and just the bonds that I made with these guys in college, it takes 4 and 5 years to build those kind of bonds. And these kids aren't going to have that And so who other than what Greg's talking about, social media is going to be their influencer, not the coaches that they spent 4 or 5 years with, not the teammates that they spent 4 or 5 years with, not even the sorority girls they may have spent 2 or 3 months with. I don't know who's going to influence them. It's social media, and that's not a good influence.
Well, I can tell you who's influencing because you get calls all the time. Maybe it's a summer coach, a friend of the family, and you get a call, well, Johnny's going to put his name in the portal at the end of the year. And I literally had this conversation with a guy, and I was like, it's December, man. It's early December. The conference play hadn't even started. Oh, he don't like the way dude treating him around there. And I remember Coach Walker telling me, I wouldn't dare to talk to a kid like that, man. I wouldn't even want him on my team if he turned out to be as good as Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, he's checked out on his team in December already. And that's what's going. I've had coaches tell me this year, you know, I think this kid's a Power 5 kid, but, you know, they ain't taking high school kids, so I think it'd be a good idea if you let him come to Little Rock and rock out for a year, then put his name in the portal and get a bag. I've literally had that conversation with more than one coach.
Wow.
And it's like,
You know, there are going to be situations where the players are going to be the highest paid person on campus.
oh, I think that's the case some places
I'm talking
right
about
now.
university president, AD, coaches
Head
right
coach.
across the board. It's coming, and that's okay. You know, I've got a
Shador may make more money than Dion
yeah.
officially at Colorado this year. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Greg and I talked about this, and I threw this out to a man that's heavily involved in the NIL last week when I knew we were going to do this show. Okay, this House versus the NCAA $2.88 billion lawsuit that's going on. That's a big deal right now. They've got all this legislation going on. $22 million going to the Power 4 schools out of their TV package to pay the kids. Okay, it's fine. A lot of things they talk about are good things. I agree. I get it. But all the rules are coming from the Power 4 to the NCAA, with the NCAA, and that's where it's happening. There's 26 other conferences that the assumption is all these schools and all these coaches are making all this money. Tell that to Nicholls State, to Northwest Louisiana, Stephen F. Austin, University of Idaho where we've been, University of New Orleans where I was. They got no money. They got no money. They got all these other sports. And all these kids are going to be, these kids in Olympic sports are going to be losing scholarships. They're asking the 26 other conferences to pay $350,000 each for a 10-year period to the NCAA to handle this suit. And what's it handling? Football? All these football players? I think it's time for, I'm talking about real leadership, and this may be crazy, for the other 26 conferences to say, you know what, Power 4, Power 5, y'all go have your big football league, and that's great. And we know you need us in the NCAA tournament for March Madness, and that's great, and that's your billion-dollar baby for the NCAA. But our 26, we're moving over here, and we're going to get our own conference commissioner. We're going to have a commissioner and a board of governors, and we're going to have a scholarship league. And this is going to be a scholarship league with what the NIL was supposed to be. Name, image, and likeness, if a kid can do that. Summer jobs. And you know what? If you want to come poach our players, this is our league. You can pay us a fine, just a fee to do it just like they do in if there's a player in Italy and the NBA wants to draft him, they have to pay a fee to that team over there. And then you know what? That's Fox Network needs programming, NBC needs programming, all these other people need programming. Okay, we're not on ESPN, but we're on TV. We're playing in these leagues, and we'll do our own conference championships. We will handle that. The Sun Belt will put on the women's volleyball championship. The Mountain West is going to put on the football championship. And then if they want to have a Super Bowl, those 26 versus the Power 5 and split that money, great. But that takes real leadership. And you know, I'd take it even a step further. I'd say the hell with you. We're not going to play you in football or basketball, you other people. But this is the way we're going to do it over here. because there's a lot of kids are going to lose their scholarships. A lot of programs are going to get dropped as a result of all this money. And I still think it's about the opportunity and the experience for these kids. And that may be crazy, but I don't know.
It's great that you said that, excuse me, Coach, because we had this conversation, and some of you out there who are pretty good at math listen to these numbers, and I think the way they worded it was it $2.8 billion? I think the NCAA is going to take half, and the schools are going to take half. The Power Four conferences negotiated that deal, and they decided to be nice and say, okay, we'll pay 40%, and we'll let the rest of the schools pay the other 60%.
They're going to pay 40%.
Well, they make more than 40% of the money.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the late John Weefall once explained to me, I was having a conversation with him, and we were talking about certain schools, and I said, well, you know, some of these basketball schools. He said, what basketball schools are you talking about? I said, like Kansas and North Carolina. He put his arm on my shoulder, and he said, let me explain something to you. There's no such thing as a basketball school. He said, there's not a president or an athletic director in this country who bases the decision in athletics based on basketball. And then he broke it down to me why football was so much more important from a revenue standpoint. And so when you think about that, when they send the Power Four schools said we'll pay 40% and the rest of you guys pay 60%. Well, this CBS contract that the SEC get, it's because of the football, and the one that the Big Ten get from ABC, it's because of football. So I'm interested to see what the mid-major schools are going to do about letting the Power Four tell them you pay 60%.
Larry, you got to be quick. I got to wrap this up.
Okay, Greg. Well, real quick, did you say Bob Knight could coach in this era?
I think he could.
No. Okay. You had a different take on it, what Tim talked about.
Yeah, I don't think people will watch it. If those 26 go on their own, you know, I don't think that those people will do it, because the biggest fear is we're going to get left out of the NCAA tournament, and nobody wants that. When Oakland went Division I in 2000, there were 261 Division I teams. There are now 364. So in 24 years, over 100 schools have gone, because they want. This is how what happened to Oakland this year, what the NCAA tournament has done to our institution. And I'm not just talking about money that it's brought in. I'm talking about 8.3 million people watched the Kentucky game. That was a 2-hour commercial for Oakland University. Where else would we ever get? Where else could you ever get that? You can't. And that's why. And why is the NCAA tournament the greatest sporting event in the world, in my opinion? Is because in Oakland beats a Kentucky. You don't see that anymore. It's like Hoosiers. You know, why is that the greatest movie of all time?
Right.
It's because
Haven't seen The Godfather.
They beat the little guy beat the big guy. What did you say?
It's because you haven't seen The Godfather. That's why Hoosiers.
Oh.
I'm from Indiana.
The greatest
You're
sports
right.
movie
Yeah.
of all
I
time.
know.
How's
I'm
that?
joking.
But you see what I'm saying? It's this, the little guy can beat the big guy. This is the one area that it can happen, and the world loves that, right? Well, if you do this, that goes away.
Coach, I agree with you.
Tim,
I agree with you.
did you hear me say I had to wrap it up? I told Larry that. You know how long you've been up here talking?
We're going to go eat. We're going to talk about this.
Yeah,
Nothing better to do.
He's second now in the MVP voting. He had been the early favorite. You almost dropped down to number 3 with that little extra comment. Voddie Baucham's out here in this audience, and believe it or not, guys, people want to hear from Voddie more than a bunch of basketball coaches. And so I'm going to toss it over to T.J. Moe. We're going to reconfigure the stage a little bit. I'm going to go off and get me a little bit of water. Thank you guys so much for coming in and supporting us. You guys get more to eat that's here in the audience. I'm going to get a little water, and me and Voddie Baucham will be up here next talking about our Lord and Savior.
Amen.
We're here with three-time Super Bowl champion Mark Schlereth. Mark, what'd you think of all that?
Well, I loved it. I love the conversation, and one of the things I've always loved about Jason, he's fairly controversial at times, and I've worked with him both at ESPN and at Fox, and I've always thought that the guys who challenge you, the hosts that are able to make you think critically, those are the guys that inspire me. When you come into a situation, you've got your opinion on something sports topic wise, and you state your opinion, and that host listens. Jason listens to you, and then challenges you on something to where you get to the point where you say, you know what, maybe I better rethink my opinion. Maybe he is right, or maybe I haven't thought that out well, or maybe, I think the guy's an idiot and I've moved on from that. But the bottom line is he challenges you, he makes you think, and I really, that's why I've always, like when he called and said, can you come out? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I can come out, because I've always had that respect for Jason.
You obviously been in corporate media for quite a while now, 20 years or so. And you, in my view, an outspoken Christian, certainly on Twitter, I've seen you do it. There's something called the Sports Spectrum. I've seen you on there, not afraid to tell your story. In a time like this, where it's not super popular to talk about your faith, what's it like to be that outspoken Christian?
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly how outspoken I am. I just know what I believe in. And so when the situations arise, to have that conversation, I'm going to have that conversation. It doesn't scare me to have that conversation. So, it's always been one of those things from the time I was a little boy. There's always an example of faith in my house. And my mother was an incredibly strong Christian and went to Bible school, and she did all kinds of different things. And, I have this vision in my head of what our kitchen table looked like in our house. So there was always her Bible. There was always whatever she was working on, whatever notebook and workbook she was working through for her classes. And there was always an art project, and usually a sewing project. And so I always think of, I think it's Psalms 119:11, which says, I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. And that scripture reminds me of my mother. I've always kind of changed it. I think of her kitchen table. And so there was always this example for me as a young child of what's important. And so that was our family, and that just always, I grew up with that, and I believe in that. And I just was always given that example growing up of, this is who you are, this is your faith, and don't be ashamed of it.
So lifelong Christian, when did your Christianity take root? When did it become your own? When did you become a man standing on your own 2 feet, willing to go out and spread the gospel?
I think when I first got to Washington as a draft pick of the Washington Redskins, the very first day of training camp, Joe Gibbs got up in front of the team before our team meetings, introduced Lee Corder, who was our pastor, he was our team chaplain, introduced Lee. Lee spoke to the entirety of the team, and Joe invited everybody to Bible study after the meetings. And truth be told, I grew up in a Christian household, but I got to Washington. The reason I showed up to that meeting was I thought that if it came down between me and another guy who was going to make the team and who wouldn't make the team, I might have a better chance of making the team if I was a guy front row and center in Bible study. And if I'm completely honest here, that's exactly why I showed up. But I'm reminded of a scripture when I went into that meeting and I saw guys who really were connected, guys who really loved each other, guys who were really supportive of one another, guys who really were Christian men that loved and held each other accountable and invested in each other's lives. That's what I saw. I didn't know what the scripture was at the time, but they will know you're my disciples by your love for one another. And I saw that example. And which really kind of was a catalytic event in my life to kind of re-engage and reconnect and all those things that I learned all growing up to reestablish myself in that community.
What was it like playing for Joe Gibbs? I've heard incredible stories about him. Obviously, you just told one about how certainly wasn't mandatory, but might help you on the field if you're in those Christian meetings. What was it like playing for a guy who I think I've heard you say before, walks in and says, fellas, Jesus first, family and friends second, football third?
Yeah, that was the very first meeting before our first minicamp. Was he said, I'll never forget it, sitting in the front row with my pen and my backup pen, and I was just going to be this great rookie and have my notebooks out, and Joe Gibbs walks up to the meeting room. There's 80 some odd guys in there, and it all goes hush, and stands in front of the podium and says, "Hey man, today I'm going to give you guys." It was like welcome to the '89 season, but today I'm going to give you guys some priorities for your life. And, I'm priorities for your life. And that's what he said. He said the first and foremost, number one priority in your life should be your relationship with Jesus Christ. He goes, secondly, your relationship with your family and friends. And third, being the best football player you can be. And he said, and I guarantee you cannot be the best football player you can be if your priority 1 and 2 aren't in line. And I will tell you the other thing that always, and Joe is probably the most regal human being I've ever been around. He is such an unbelievably godly man, but such a kind man. And he was demanding. I mean, there's no question. If you didn't play well, you're going to get cut. You understood what the rules were. But I remember suffering or really struggling in 1992 with an elbow and a knee that needed an operation. And I went through the whole season where I didn't practice, and that drove Joe crazy. Joe wanted you to practice. I mean, I couldn't. There was times I couldn't walk on Saturdays, and I would play on Sundays. And I don't know. It was probably November-ish, and Joe, I coming up the elevator because I couldn't walk up the stairs. So I'm coming up the elevator at Redskin Park, and as soon as the elevator doors open, Joe's standing there. It startled you. And he's like, hey, man, swing by my office tomorrow morning. I want to talk to you right before meetings. And which is the worst thing you can tell a player, right? Like, hey, man, if you're going to cut me, just cut me right now. So I can at least go home. And so, of course, I tossed and turned all night long. And I literally show up the next morning. It's 5 minutes to 9 or whatever. Our meeting starts at 9, 10. And I barely knock on the door, so it's nice and quiet. And just rap, hoping that, because Joe was a night owl. Like, he'd work all until 2 in the morning, and I was like, maybe he'd be asleep and he wouldn't hear. And I was like, hey, I stopped by your office. Nobody answered. So as soon as I knocked, he said, come in. So I come in and I sit down, and he says, hey, man, I just wanted to call you in here to tell you how much I appreciate, the sacrifice that you're making. If you feel like you're hindering your career, you're hurting yourself for your future, I'll put you on IR right now, and we'll go have your knee surgery, go have your elbow surgery, get yourself back for next season. And then he said something to me. He goes, I want you to look at the grease board behind you. And on that grease board, there were about 15 names, and my name was in there. And he said to me, I just want you to know that you and your teammates, some injuries, some personal, some marital, whatever, are all struggling with something, and I want you to know that I pray for you by name every day, on my knees every day. And that's the human that he was. And so that was the Christian that he was. That was the example that I had coming up through the NFL. And so, those were the things that I tried to bring with me from Washington, where I was being, mentored, to becoming a mentee when I went to Denver. And I was the guy holding Bible studies. I was the guy that was inviting people. And so the influence and the impact that Joe Gibbs had on his football teams, not only winning championships and doing all that stuff, but more importantly, growing a bunch of boys up into men who were committed to their families and committed to Christ and committed to their communities and growing on a day-to-day basis. So he's had an incredible impact, as maybe if not as impactful, maybe more impactful than any coach that's ever coached in the National Football League.
So how do we get back to that? It seems like coaches today would be scared to death to do 10% of what you just described Joe Gibbs does. How do we get back to where coaches like the guys we just heard up here were actually mentors? They talked about it being like parenting, and giving you the Christian principles that everybody just assumed you'd get from football coaches once upon a time. Now they seem afraid to do that.
Yeah, I think obviously, there are so many things where you worry about getting canceled, and I think the bottom line is you can't be worried about getting canceled. The bottom line is I think most players want to be coached, want to be cared for, want to be loved, and want to be told the truth. And so I just think it's one of those things where you're just going to have to be bold in your faith, and you're going to have to do it in a way in such that, listen, the gospel will step on your toes. It just will. So you're just going to have to be authentic. And as long as you're authentic and you are who you are, I think most guys respect that and will allow that to happen. It's just one of those things. It's the old saying: you preach the gospel always, and only use words when absolutely necessary. If people know that you're authentic and that you care and that you love them, then I think people will be receptive to you, sharing Christ.
Last question. You've got an acting career. If you could go back and cast yourself in any movie, you've done some soap operas when you got out. I've seen you on Ballers as recently as the last few years. If you could go back to any movie that you've seen and cast yourself, what would it be?
Oh my gosh! I would have wanted to work next to Arnold in one of those '80s classic movies. We always joke around on my radio show that I've got this picture that floats around the internet of me in high school, and they certainly miscast. What was the movie that? Oh gosh, all of a sudden I can't remember it. Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. I go, that should have been me. But no, I always joke around with my Arnold Schwarzenegger stories. I don't know how much time do we got. We got a minute? No. Yeah. We got a. We're gonna get to Jeff. Okay, real quick minute. So, in 1992. As a member of the Redskins, I went to the presidential fitness campaign. As a member of the Redskins, we were out there and got a chance to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we're in this huge room with hundreds and hundreds of celebrities. And every time I get close to him, he would disappear. And so all night long, I was trying to meet Arnold and I never got to meet him. And then, anyhow, Maria Shriver came down to talk to me because Dan O'Brien was a member of the University of Idaho when I was there, and he was the Olympic decathlete, and she was doing a story on him. And so she talked to me about Dan O'Brien, and I said, hey, can I just meet your husband? She goes, yeah. So we're arm in arm through the crowd going to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Arnold he's like 5'11", and I was huge. I was way bigger than him. And, so I shook his hand, and I'll never forget, this is exactly how it went. He shook his hand, and he reached up, and he goes, I make it a point never to stand by anybody larger than me for more than a minute. And he grabbed me and goes, look at his shoulders. He's a monster. And then he just took off. And so, the whole thing was Arnold did not want to get a picture taken beside somebody who dwarfed him. Because at that time, he was the action hero of our time. So anything I could have been cast with Arnold, it would have been awesome.
Awesome. Mark, thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. All right, we have Jeff George, former #1 overall draft pick, 1990 draft. Jeff, how are you, sir? Good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, wouldn't have missed it.
I'm told that you are there's nobody more proud of the transformation of Jason Whitlock than you, moving from strip clubs to hosting 1,000 men at Christian conferences. What have you seen the transformation since your high school days into even probably 6 years ago now into today?
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I get those questions. It's like, no, Jason, obviously, of course, as you know, we grew up together, grew up on the east side of Indianapolis, and just seeing how successful he's been all over the years, and the whole east side, actually all of, Indianapolis, so proud of him. But the side that you see isn't, really the true side. Yeah, we all evolve, and we all make mistakes growing up, and, strip clubs, all that, and especially if you're a single guy, with money, it's easy to fall into that category. But he's tasked me, to say how he's evolved. It's more of like how proud. He's one of my best friends, and just proud of what he's doing. What he's, if you understood where what the east side of Indianapolis is all about. And you come from nothing. All of our parents, we came from great family, great parents, great background. I hear you talking about Christianity, and we all went to church. We all, went to FCA and classes in school. But to really be that person that we all want to be. We all want to be a strong Christian. We all want to make all the right choices, but we don't. But that's part of life. That's part of growing into a Christian, and that's kind of what he's done. And couldn't be more proud of him. He great mother, great brother, great dad. Known him forever, and I love him to death. He's like my brother. He's I guess I can say my older brother. He's a year older than me, so he's my older brother. But I love him to death, proud of him. We all are, and he's just an incredible success. And to see that the man that he is now, and the Christian man that he is, and that's something to be said for. So really proud of Jason.
Did you see it coming? I mean, this is a guy who tells stories about being in the strip club saying, you really need to come to church on Sunday. You really need Jesus. But he's saying this in the strip club. Is this something you saw coming?
I think he always had it in him, I guess. I don't, I think when you're young, you hang out at places like that. But I haven't been to a strip club in forever. So, hey, if you save that one person, if he goes there and somebody says, hey, that's Jason, I know, and you want to try shine the light, want people to see Christ in you, and just be a role model. So wherever you're at, maybe it's I guess if it's a strip club, and if you save that one person, I guess that's what it's all about.
I guess so. You don't want to hear that. So if you watch the show, Jason loves to go in on Stephen A. Smith and his basketball career that was made up, didn't exist. I've only actually ever seen one picture of Jason playing football. He was actually pretty off balance. To demonstrate, can you confirm that Jason did actually play football, and was he any good?
So not just football, but he was a heck of a basketball player. He had a good shot. He was the center on the team, and we went to Stony Brook Junior High in the east side of Indianapolis, and he was just an all-around athlete, track guy, and you wouldn't know it. He had the quickest feet ever, and I'm not hyping him up. I'm just being honest with you. And he was, we were pretty successful all through high school, and he was a year older than me, like I said. And football-wise, we won a couple state championships, or he won one, then I'd won two, but I had to throw that out there. But he was our captain. He was very respected in high school. Everybody looked up to him, and like I said, I'm not just blowing smoke up anybody's butt. I'm just being honest, and he was that guy that everybody looked to. So yeah, he played football. He was my left tackle. I can honestly say I never got touched in high school, coming up from the left side. And if I did, I probably would have let him have it. But yeah, he was that guy. He was a stud in high school, and but more importantly, he's a better person now. So I love him.
Last one, and I'm putting you on the spot. What's your best Jason Whitlock story from high school?
Best. Well, he liked to eat, So I have a lot of stories of pregame meals. A lot of us eating, a little pasta in there, but he liked his McDonald's. So every pregame meal it always came from McDonald's, and I can't remember the one sandwich that they don't have it anymore. I know if he was standing here, he would say, "Oh yeah, Jeff, it's that." But it was the McRib. Yeah. It's the McRib. I don't know why that just came to me. So I guess there's a lot of personal stories that I guess I can't say, but he liked his food, and the McRib was his favorite.
Jeff George, thank you, sir.
All right.
Appreciate you being here. Here we go. Jason Whitlock talking to Voddie Baucham about his new book.
All right, welcome back, guys, here in Rocketown with me. If you come back, the main attraction is here. I believe one of the great disciples of our time is here with me on stage. I'm honored. I'm relieved. Voddie Baucham, one of the great evangelists across the globe. He had some travel issues yesterday. They put a scare into me. There was some weather in Dallas, and Voddie had trouble getting to Dallas, and then there was concern about Voddie coming here to Nashville to be with us and making sure he could get back to Dallas and not have to go through the same travel concerns. And I say this authentically, Voddie. TJ Moe can tell you, I broke down in tears when we thought yesterday you weren't coming. I broke down in tears. I was like, oh my God, I got to have Voddie here. So thank you so much for being here. It's not the first time Voddie's been on Fearless, but I'm just so honored and thrilled that you would join me for our second annual roll call event, Voddie Baucham.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me. Yeah.
And so Voddie's got a new book out, and we'll certainly talk about that. It's Not Like Being Black, How Sexual Activists Hijacked the Civil Rights Movement. And I think this book is perfectly timed. You guys have heard me on stage reference some of my friends that are here in town that I've known for 30, 40 years. And so, Tim, just say amen if I have been saying for at least 10 years, have I not been telling y'all, I've been telling your wives, like, hey, they're going to legalize pedophilia if we don't get it right. Have I not been saying that, Tim, for more than a decade? Tim Walton left. I thought Tim has stepped out, obviously, or he's doing something else. But anyway, Voddie, talk about your book and what you're trying to accomplish in your book.
Yeah, first of all, it comes out Tuesday, just in time for Pride Month, and been looking forward to that for a while. This is something I started writing articles about this, and with almost the same title, 2007, 2008, again in 2010, 2012. Then it was pre-Obergefell, right, before the legalization of so-called same-sex marriage. And then it was about sort of raising the alarm. You know, this is where we're going. This is what is going to happen. This is what it's going to cost us. But in that pre-Obergefell world, it was hard to get people, to find people who were willing to publish a book like that. And now, of course, post-Obergefell, that was just 2015, things have changed dramatically in the ensuing years. And now we're looking at it from the other end, right? We're looking at the consequences of what has happened. And all of it was sort of couched in this gay is the new black ideology, terminology. And for me, that came on my radar really in 2008. So if you remember in 2008, there was Proposition 8 in California. And so gay marriage was on the ballot in California. And everybody thought that would be the first domino to fall, that things would really ramp up because obviously they were going to get same-sex marriage in California. But they didn't. And I mean, people were baffled, like, how could this happen? The Advocate, the leading gay magazine, ran a cover article called Gay is the New Black. And in it, they were making an argument that's been made for a while that movement, the LGBT movement, was the next phase in the civil rights movement. They were bemoaning the fact that in California, their defeat was due in large part to the black vote. And they just couldn't believe that, people who had experienced similar things to them would not be, on their side. And so that's when I really started talking about this whole gay is not the new black, it's not like being black, and writing on it. So I've been dealing with this for a while, but in recent days it just seemed like it was really important to address it.
So do you feel like they authentically believe that, or was it just a strategic move to cover themselves in blackness?
I think it's both. There's a really important book, and I talk about it here. It's the title of it is After the Ball. The subtitle is How America Will Overcome Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the Decade of the 90s. It was published in 1989 by two Harvard professors, Russell Kirk, Hunter Madsen. One was in psychology and one was in marketing. And it was a marketing and propaganda campaign that they were proposing. Now, if if you find the book today, it's hard to find, but if you find the book today and read it, it reads like a history book, right? It reads like somebody's retelling what happened, but it's not. This was the strategy that they were laying out. And, you know, you think back to the late 80s, that's the height of the AIDS crisis. And things were kind of on a razor's edge at that time for the gay movement, because on the one hand, there were people who were very negative towards the movement because of the lifestyle, right? The bathhouses in San Francisco and, you know, other things and like that, where this, you know, disease was spreading in this community and because of this lifestyle. But on the other hand, Kirk and Madsen said, this is an opportunity. We can sort of present ourselves as a sympathetic minority group. And that's exactly what they set out to do. Basically using the whole, we are the next people up, if you will, in this movement towards and for civil rights. So it was very strategic, but there's also a sense in which people really do believe that.
So 2008, black people wouldn't get on board with it, and it fails in California. What happened? How did they get us on board with it? Because it does seem that many black people now have adopted the mentality that gay is the new black, or we're allies.
Yeah. I don't think it's as much of people adopting that mentality as it is of this sort of strategic move. The other piece of this puzzle is, this is the, you know, we talked before about fault lines, my last book, Fault Lines, dealing with the critical social justice movement. And I've often likened the social justice movement to a train with a bunch of boxcars, right? And everybody was looking at the racial justice, anti-racist boxcar and wanting to get on that boxcar, but there are other boxcars on the critical social justice train. There's the open borders boxcar, there's the climate justice boxcar, there's the, you know, and there is the LGBTQIA2S plus boxcar
Silent
as well,
P. Don't
right?
forget the silent P.
Yeah. And so it's part of the same movement. It's part of that same sort of neo-Marxist oppressor-oppressed ideology. And the smoking gun in this, in case you think, you know, I'm just making this up, is the new Pride Progress flag. The Pride Progress flag is the old gay flag, which is the rainbow flag, right? But they add those chevrons on the side, right? And the chevrons, you get the white and the pink and the baby blue, and so we're bringing in the transgender movement. But the last two chevrons are brown and black. Well, what do brown and black chevrons have to do with this flag that's supposed to be about a movement of, you know, sexual identity, sexual orientation, so on and so forth? Well, what it has to do with is the idea that, and that's why they are now using the term sexual minorities, right? It's the idea that there's this hegemonic power, there's this cultural oppressor, the white, male, heterosexual, cisgendered, able-bodied, native-born, you know, you keep going down the list and you get to Christian. And ultimately, Christianity is the moral banner of the oppressor in Western civilization. And so, because that's the idea, then anybody who, you know, doesn't align with Christian sexual morals is viewed as a sexual minority. That's how they're using the term. So you add that brown and black chevron to the Pride Progress flag in order to make it clear that this movement is about the neo-Marxist oppressor-oppressed paradigm, and these are oppressed people.
So I've watched so many of your sermons and speeches that I've heard you talk about all these things, and I've always wanted to ask you, and maybe you've covered and I just missed it, but why is it that black people aren't up in arms that our skin color is being used to justify things that are out of line with biblical values. And it seems like if you package anything black, if they package poison ivy or any type of poison, if they call it, well, this is a black poison, well, now you can't criticize it because it's black. And that's what I see them doing with the LGBTQ thing. And that's why I see this all rooted in racial idolatry, that we as black people, and I think it's like anything that we think is anti-white man, we think is good for us. And that I'm spend most of my show and most of my mission trying to snap people out of that mindset that just because it hurts the white Christian heterosexual man, there's no value in that for you. What if you're a Christian heterosexual man? Aren't we, and again, this is my whole, it's just racial idolatry just drives me crazy. I don't even know if I have a great question, but I just want you to respond to that.
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces to that. On the one hand, black people are offended. You talk to the average black person, you know, in your circles, and they don't like this. They don't like people playing that card. So on the one hand, there's that. But on the other hand, people who are in the grievance business, right? If you're playing that whole oppressed card, then you want to have an alliance with other oppressed peoples, with other oppressed groups. You want to put the pressure on the so-called oppressor. And so when you have people who are, you know, sort of aligning with you, by the way, the A, a lot of people don't know this, but in the LGBTQ, there's always the I and the A. The A is for either asexual or allies. That's what it stands for, allies, right? Again, because this movement is about the oppressor-oppressed paradigm. This movement is about, you know, sort of joining together. Because think about it. Just look at the alphabet. I got a chapter on this in the book, but if you just look at the acronym, right, just L and G, right? Well, historically, anybody who knows anything about the lesbian movement and the homosexual movement, you know, these two groups haven't historically gotten along with one another, right? And yet they're in this thing together. Not only that, but those two groups for a generation now have been trying to argue this is all about biology. You've got pheromone studies, brain studies, you know, you got the twin study, all these different studies trying to find a gay gene, right? Trying to prove that this is biological. We were born this way. It's in our genes. It's in our biology. Well, then the T's come along and the T's say biology doesn't mean anything. Well, how? I mean, that's inherently contradictory, right? It's mutually exclusive, or at least it ought to be. How do you hold those things together? You hold those things together when you're joined in a particular ideology that has to do with an oppressor-oppressed paradigm, and you're trying to get as many people together as you can to go against the so-called oppressor.
What are there solutions talked about in the book, and are there solutions to this?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to inform and equip. I want believers to understand what happened. I want them to understand how we got here. So I spend a lot of time talking about that, how we got here, ideologically, philosophically, historically. How did we legally? How did we get here? And I want them to be equipped with biblical answers. What do we believe about God and marriage and family and manhood and womanhood? And how do we make an argument for that? But at the end of the day, what I'm calling for is a preparation to suffer, right? Because we're at a place now where this is our Caesar is Lord moment. First century Christians suffered because they wouldn't bow the knee and confess that Caesar is Lord. No, Caesar is not Lord, Jesus is Lord. This is our Caesar is Lord moment. The government is saying to us, look at those two men and say that's a marriage. Caesar is Lord. he gets to decide what marriage is. He gets to define what marriage is. Or look at that man and say that that's a woman, right? Look at that man and say that that's a woman. Or look at that woman and say that that's a man. Say that men can get pregnant. Look at that man and say she, her. Caesar is Lord. Say Caesar is Lord. We determine reality. Well, we can't do that. We can't abide by that. And if we can't abide by that, and if we have a gospel to proclaim, and if we know that people are lost and hurting and dying and that their only hope is the person and work of the Lord Jesus Christ, then we have no alternative but to stand up and say, Caesar is not Lord, Jesus is Lord, and there's going to be a price to pay for that. So I'm calling people to be ready to take up their cross, deny themselves, and follow him. This is going to cost us. They're going to say, bake the cake. They're going to say, make the dress. They're going to come to the pastor and say, perform the wedding. It's coming. And when it comes, we have to be ready to endure whatever it is that we need to endure so that we can continue to rely on the one thing that is our only hope. This is not at its core a political issue. This is a spiritual issue. We need hearts changed. We need revival. We need repentance. We need awakening. And the only way that comes is if we're willing to pay the cost in order to proclaim the truth of the gospel.
And so that's, again, now you're taking me to why yesterday I was crying thinking Voddie's not going to be here. My theme, growth requires sacrifice. And all the things that we say we love about America, the freedoms and all of that, people made real sacrifices for that. And somehow I think we got so satisfied or comfortable with what people before us created that we forgot how to sacrifice. And that's required or it will all be taken away. And so put some meat on the bones in terms of what type of sacrificing we're going to have to do. Because, I mean, again, I think some of us are going to have to go to jail.
Yeah, some of us may. Some of us are going to lose jobs. People are already losing jobs. People are losing their businesses. People are losing their livelihoods. People are losing custody of their children. It's happening. People are losing custody of their children because they are not willing to go along with gender-affirming care. There was a paper that was published on the NIH, National Institutes of Health website, I think last week. And I don't know if you had talked about this or not. I've been traveling all around, but there's a new study now. People who are going through this gender-affirming care and these gender reassignments and this and that and the other, they are 12 times more likely to be suicidal. Their suicide rate is 12 times higher. Now, what have we been told? Well, what's the phrase? Would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter, right? If we don't go along with gender-affirming care, these people are going to commit suicide. If we don't do the hormones, if we don't do the surgeries, these people are going to commit suicide. Now, we look at this, and what we're finding is that they become more suicidal with this gender-affirming care. But that's not the kicker. The kicker is the conclusion. The conclusion was we need to do a better job of psychiatric support after treatment. Not we need to repent. Not we've made a terrible mistake. No. We just need to do better psychiatric follow-up after we mutilate these young people. So, you know, there are people who've lost their children, lost custody of their children because they're not willing to go along with what we now know is this failed approach. People have lost teaching positions. Coaches have lost their position. I mean, it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen with this new Title IX issue, right, that just came a couple of weeks ago. Now, all of a sudden, people have to be allowed to compete based on their declared gender, and I know you've talked about this and what this means for women's sports. It's going to be, it already is devastating. right? We see the videos and everything else of, what's happening because of this. But what's happening? What happens if a coach is asked that question and doesn't answer it the way we heard it answered at the women's NCAA tournament, right? What happens if the answer is no, we shouldn't have that? Listen, people are going to lose their job, People are coming after, was it Harrison Butker, because of a speech that he made as a Catholic man at a Catholic university for their Catholic graduation service, saying Catholic things, right? And there are people who, they want him fired. They want him fired from kicking a football because he said Catholic stuff at a Catholic thing, right? Those are just a few of the very real, very tangible ways that there's going to have to be a price paid.
My other argument, Voddie, is that too many of us, and I'll start with myself, we love to point, there go the bad guy, it's them. And what I've had to come to grips with is like, I'm the bad guy. Because, and as it relates to how we got here to where sexual identity and sexual orientation is like one of our most important values and virtues. And I'm like, so how did we get here where drag queens are out in the street and they're gyrating in front of kids and they just want to put their sexuality everywhere? And what I had to realize is like, as a heterosexual person, that's exactly what we did to this. If you turn on any movie, The Godfather is one of my favorite movies, Scarface, Sex and the City. You watch any of these movies that I used to love, and I watch them now with the scales off my eyes, and I'm like, man, did we just shove heterosexual sex down everybody's throats? Yeah. And I've had like, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Yeah. We made heterosexual sex, we just jammed it down everyone's throat. And so they have come back and said, no, we're going to do the same thing. No, we're not going to be in all the movies, but we'll be, Pride Month's coming up, and we're going to get out in the street, and we're going to gyrate and blah, blah, blah. And so I keep trying to tell people, like, I got to clean me up. Yeah. That's going to help clean this mess up. I can't just point at them and say, you're the bad guy. No, they're the bad guys. But I opened the door for them to make their sexual identity the same way. I used to write columns about my sexual promiscuity and trips to Vegas. I once wrote a column, Voddie. I told when the camera wasn't on, I told Voddie, I used to be retarded, and I say that in all seriousness. I wrote a column.
So you can't say that word.
You
can't say that word.
I was retarded.
We must be at, I forgot where we were. Go ahead.
But, Voddie, I once wrote a column saying that if a man made X amount of dollars, his wife had to be good with him having so many trips per year where he got to do whatever he wanted. And I wrote this in a column. And it was a joke, but it was in a column. And so I sit there, I did this, and that's what I'm trying to get people. We got to clean ourselves up. That's how we clean. And so we can stand righteously. Because if I don't have skeletons in my closet, if I'm not on tape at a Diddy party, I can now stand on truth without being worried that Diddy's going to expose me. That's what we've lost. And we got to sacrifice this instant gratification pleasure that we've all fallen in love with and live righteously so we can stand on truth.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And that's why, in that process, equip, inform. Part of that informing, remember, is a biblical understanding and a biblical view of, God, manhood, womanhood, marriage, human sexuality. And what we did was there was the advent of contraceptives. And contraceptives and then abortion meant that we could divorce sex from pregnancy, right?
And love.
And if you can divorce sex from pregnancy, then you can divorce sex from marriage. And if you divorce sex from marriage and have this, sexual revolution, right? Talk about the 1960s, 1970s, so on and so forth. What you do is you effectively undermine and transform the institution. Because you undermine and transform the institution, there becomes this wide open door of talking about ways to redefine the institution. It didn't just come out of nowhere, right? In Romans chapter 1, when we talk about, men being without excuse because they're suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, we start with denying that there's a God. Everybody wants to go from there immediately to these homosexuality and men with men and women with women. But before that, there's a paragraph before that, and the paragraph before that is about our sexual attitudes. It's about that sexual revolution. So there's also a paragraph after that, right? So it's not as though homosexuality is sort of the end of the line, if you will. There's more devolution to culture, and we're seeing that. We're seeing our culture devolve in so many ways. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, I live in Lusaka. I live in Zambia. I've been living there it'll be 9 years in August. And I come back 3 or 4 times a year, and I'm always amazed and shocked by the things that I see, by the trends, that I see. Just by the commercials. I'm watching a ball game, and by the commercials that come on when I'm watching a ball game, the shows and things like that are available and that are popular or whatever. We've lost our minds, man. We've been given over to a debased mind, which is exactly what the judgment of God does there in Romans chapter 1. And the only answer to that is for God to intervene.
Voddie, you and I are around the same age, and so we grew up at the start of rap music. And it's one of the things I just talk about when I look at Diddy and the problems he has and what's been exposed about him. And by the way, I've never been to a Diddy party. I don't want anybody to watch this and think that I have.
Yeah, the clip, they snipped that part right there. It's out there. It's out there.
But I look at what rap music, and again, it's not all music is not as good as it used to be, but the profanity, the promotion of nihilistic values, it's all in the rap music.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason why.
From Rapper's Delight to WAP and Pound Town and
yes.
All the anyway, it boggles the mind.
I would love for you, because I've never seen a sermon.
That distance.
I've never seen a sermon from anybody, and I would love, and maybe you're not prepared today, but to get music and how it tunes your heart and it leaves an indelible print on you. I can remember song lyrics from 30 years ago. Now, I've read To Kill a Mockingbird probably 5 times. I've read Roots 2 or 3 times. I can't remember any of the sentences, but the music, it's on me, and I've had to pour all this gospel music in me trying to flush out all the rap, but music seems like such an important tool for the devil and the debasement of this society, and I'm wondering, does the Bible talk about music and how it changes the soul?
Yeah, there's a whole book of music. The book of Psalms, sing to the Lord a new song, sing to the Lord all the earth. I mean, the Bible, over and over and over, it's replete with these references to music, and music is very powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools in the world. That's why we use it in pedagogy. That's why we use it in teaching, right? When you learn your alphabet, you don't just go A, B, C, you sing a song, right? Because that helps you to memorize. It impacts us in ways far deeper than just the printed and written or spoken word can. And so it's because of that it has always been a tool that the adversary has used from the beginning. Nothing's changed in that regard. He's still operating as a choir master.
And so I look at, like, say, twerking, which seems to go hand in hand with rap music. And if you listen to the lyrics, a lot of rap music, it's about.
Well, see, now you put the pictures all up.
It's about violation of the rear end. A lot of rap music and twerking.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, we got to get the scales off our eyes and look at actually what it is we're doing. I saw a video of a grown woman twerking in front of like a 5-year-old boy.
Yeah.
How are you not in prison?
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you say something about it, you're attacking black culture, right? Which, I mean, again, that is so offensive to me, right? Like that's why is that black culture? I disagree. You know, it's like I said, brother. We are in trouble, and unless God intervenes, the consequences will be dire.
And there's part of me that legitimately says, hey, these dire consequences are necessary and they're good. Bring them on.
Yeah, well, you said that. I'd much rather have mercy. I'd much rather have mercy than wrath.
Am I wrong for thinking that?
I'd much rather have mercy than wrath. There is a sense in which we say, Lord, whatever's necessary. You know, whatever's necessary. But also, please, mercy and not wrath. You know.
That's it. I want you to correct me on my thinking on that, because I'm that level of frustrated, and I think, as I told you before when I was telling you about how retarded I am, maybe I think that way because I don't have kids. If I had kids, I'd probably want more mercy because I don't want my kids to go through that.
Yeah, I think the other thing, though, is we tend to welcome God's wrath when we're looking out there, right? If I'm looking out there and I'm seeing that deserves wrath, that deserves wrath, that deserves wrath, bring it. All that means is I'm not taking my sin seriously enough. Because if I'm taking my sin seriously enough, then I recognize that if anybody out there is deserving of the wrath of God, this guy right here is deserving of the wrath of God.
I definitely think I'm worthy
and so
of that.
My desire is for repentance and awakening and mercy, you know. But yeah, whatever's necessary. But please, mercy, not wrath.
I need you as a mentor.
And it's His kindness that leads us to repentance.
Huh. Well, I certainly feel like I don't have and again, I'm making this personal, but you get an opportunity to talk to Voddie, I might as well sit on the therapist couch and, and get some help. But I spend a lot of time repenting. That's basically all that I do on the show. But I am just so frustrated by what I see because I had such a remarkable childhood. I mean, just remarkable childhood. And I want that for other kids. And I look at us just throwing it away, and we're being cowards, and we're taking convenience over. And tomorrow we'll have a panel voting about Christians and the importance of being an entrepreneur. We got to create work environments where you can be a Christian, because you go into most of these corporate workspaces, and if you don't affirm the LGBTQIA plus silent P crowd, you're not fit for leadership positions. Yeah. And they potentially could run you out of the company. And so there is, I guess that's why.
But even entrepreneurs need to be aware of the fact that, you know, the bakery that went out of business because they wouldn't make the cake, that's an entrepreneur. The dressmaker that wouldn't make the dress, that's an entrepreneur. So you can't hide from this. This is a totalizing ideology. You can't hide from this. You can't get away from this. We are going to have to face this. There is no going underground on this one. You know, we thought for a long time that people just wanted to live and let live. We were told that for a long time. We just want to live and let live. This doesn't even concern you. What does this have to do with you? These are two people who want to love each other. These are people. What does it have to do with you? And now it's confess Caesar is Lord. Bow the knee. Say he's a she. Say that's a marriage. Again, this is, neutrality is not an option on this. And so, yes, I mean, entrepreneurship. Amen, hallelujah, praise the Lord, let's do it. But don't do it thinking that somehow that's going to put you outside of this conflict.
Well, I certainly like my work environment. That we got Bibles everywhere, and
Yeah.
you can say retarded. Don't I let everybody say retarded? Dave Reed, you can quote the Bible. Voddie, we're having laws being introduced in states where if you read Scripture, that can be considered anti-Semitic, Voddie. And this is where my frustration comes from. They're illegalizing the Bible, Voddie. I'm scared. Or I don't know if I'm scared, I'm just concerned.
Oh, don't be scared. don't be scared. No, but we do. We have to be aware, and we have to be sober-minded. And we also have to recognize that this is Christianity and has been Christianity for most of the church throughout most of history. We've existed in this, sort of bubble-wrapped, safe environment as Christians here in the West in general and then in America in particular. And because of that, we've really gotten soft, We haven't really experienced persecution. There's been great freedom, great liberty for the gospel. And I thank God for it, because the gospel has gone forth not only within America, but from America as well, as a blessing to the rest of the world. And so I'm grateful for that, but I also recognize that that's not the norm. It hasn't been the norm for most of the church throughout most of history. The norm has been persecution. The norm has been marginalization, And so, on the one hand, we need to sort of wake up, open our eyes, and recognize that truth as well, and not just run into a corner somewhere as though somehow God has failed because we may have to join the rest of our brethren in that reality.
Voddie, you're here to speak to a group of men tomorrow, and I want you to talk about male masculinity, the importance of male leadership. If you could I happen to believe that all of this falls on man, that we have failed to be leaders. We've surrendered to the feminist movement and all these other movements. Am I accurate in that it's our fault?
No, that's not accurate. And I would go back to the fall. Here's what didn't happen at the fall. God didn't come after Adam ate and said, Adam, sin is now entering into the world. There's going to be a curse, but only for you, because you're the man. He didn't. He spoke to the serpent, he spoke to the woman, and he spoke to the man. Was Adam's position unique? Yes. Romans chapter 5 makes that very clear, right? My one man sin entered the world. But the fact that Adam's position was unique and critical did not excuse Eve from accountability for what she had done. So while it's important for us to call men to their rightful place and to their rightful role, it's also important for us to recognize the fact that sin affects all of us, and all of us need to flee to the cross for redemption and forgiveness. I'm
going to end tonight with this question then, because I've been in discussions where I've been telling people that this is a battle of the patriarchy versus the matriarchy. But men and women are in conflict. You think I'm wrong on that as well?
In some ways, there is very much that battle going on, but there are so many battles on so many fronts, and our adversary is crafty. And whenever we feel like we've got him figured out, he's got us right where he wants us. So is that true? It most assuredly is. That and 1,000 other fronts where we're embattled as well. And so as men, I think it's incredibly important for us to recognize our place, our role, our responsibility, and to take that, right? To meet that head on, to recognize that head on. But also, as the leaders that God is calling us to be, it's important for us to equip and to prepare all of those in our sphere of influence to take on and shoulder the responsibilities to which they've been called as well.
Hi, Voddie and Harrison Buck are calling everybody to their right roles. Voddie, thank you so much. Can't wait to hear from you tomorrow. So glad you made it today. I won't be crying. I'll be crying tears of joy tonight because Voddie's here. And thank you guys for joining us tonight. Continue to enjoy the meals. I think we'll play tomorrow, even though tomorrow's here. Maybe we should just have tomorrow come up and sing Freedom. But we'll play tomorrow, and we'll see some of you, if you're a Blaze TV subscriber, we'll see you tomorrow.